A young man slowly regained consciousness, his mind hazy. He heard a small voice urging him to wake up, and as his vision cleared, he saw a small, humanoid figure with distinct bunny ears looking down at him. He sat up abruptly, his eyes wide with surprise as he realized the bunny ears were real. He instinctively reached out, finding them warm and fluffy to the touch. The small figure, startled, asked him what he was doing. Still processing the bizarre situation, he hesitantly asked the girl why she was wearing bunny ears. She calmly corrected him, explaining that they were not mere accessories but a natural feature, as she belonged to the rabbit race. The young man's mind raced, a sudden realization dawning on him that this was no dream. He had somehow been reincarnated. He looked out at the vast, unfamiliar landscape of rolling mountains under a cloudy sky, a profound understanding settling upon him. He was in another world, a place called Alstacia. Standing beside the small rabbit girl, he gazed across the open, somewhat barren terrain, clutching a peculiar, modern-looking tool in his hand, a stark contrast to the rustic surroundings. The dense forest stretched out before them, leading into distant mountains, a wild and untamed vista. The young man's face contorted in a mask of utter shock and disbelief as the full weight of his situation crashed down upon him. He began to flail, overwhelmed by a torrent of anxieties. He cried out, wondering about basic necessities like food and a toilet, lamenting the impossibility of starting from scratch in an entirely new world. The rabbit girl watched him, a hint of confusion on her face. He hesitated, unsure how to respond to the young bunny girl's request to take her with him. She, in turn, urgently asked to discuss something, explaining that she needed to go somewhere. She explained that taking him to her village would anger everyone, simply because he was human. He pondered the implications, realizing that perhaps slavery existed in this world, and that humans hated non-humans, much like a story from a manga or game. As they continued walking, the bunny girl spotted something, exclaiming that it looked like someone had come to greet them, but then questioned if there should be anyone there. She then asked him to try talking to them, mentioning that the adults were mean. Suddenly, a monstrous hobgoblin, wielding a massive spiked club, emerged from the foliage. The bunny girl screamed in terror, realizing there was no way to get help from adults now. While he stared in shock at the creature, he quickly assessed the situation, noting the hobgoblin's dangerous appearance and its likely strength, especially if it was separated from its group. He urgently commanded the bunny girl to run and get away from there, but she cried out his name, unwilling to leave him. He then pushed her away, insisting that she run while he kept the hobgoblin's attention. She pleaded with him, reminding him that if the creature was truly so dangerous, he shouldn't bring it to the village where her friends and family were. He simply reiterated his command for her to go. As she fled, looking back with a worried expression, he faced the hobgoblin, admitting to himself that he didn't really know what he was doing. He then turned to the hobgoblin, a determined smile on his face, declaring that if she showed such a worried expression, there was no way he could stop himself from acting. He shouted, drawing the hobgoblin's attention, calling out to it to come over to him. He narrowly evaded the hobgoblin's crushing blow, the impact shaking the ground around him. He realized with a jolt that the attack had not struck him directly. As the hobgoblin prepared for another assault, he desperately searched his mind for any skill that could help him in such a dire situation, lamenting that he truly wished he possessed one. With a sudden, desperate move, he hurled a simple plastic bottle directly at the hobgoblin's face, catching the creature completely off guard. The hobgoblin recoiled, roaring in a mixture of pain and fury, its face contorted into a grotesque snarl. He, however, remained on the ground, seemingly resigned to his fate. However, the creature, still reeling from the unexpected projectile, stumbled backward over the very bottle he had thrown, losing its balance and falling awkwardly to the ground. He watched, utterly bewildered. With the hobgoblin now lying unconscious, defeated by its own clumsiness, he sat up, a wry smile on his face, and casually wondered if he should preserve the accident's site. Suddenly, he found himself in an entirely different location, lying on the ground amidst trees. Confused and disoriented, he exclaimed, demanding to know what was happening and why he was so far from where he had just been, especially after going through such trouble to save a human. He continued to voice his bewilderment, emphasizing that not only had he been attacked by a goblin, but he had also nearly died in the process. Standing over him was a majestic woman, whom he recognized and addressed as Victinia-sama. She looked down at him with a questioning gaze, wondering aloud how he was still alive and what he had done with the skills she had bestowed upon him. This sudden confrontation brought forth a memory or a revelation, as a scene from The Day Before Reincarnating in the Goddess Room appeared. He stood before the goddess, asking if he was truly being reincarnated into another world. He listened as the goddess, Victinia-sama, explained that she would clarify everything. She revealed that a god from Earth had lost a bet with her, and the consequence was his reincarnation into a world she managed. The young man, shocked, realized his status. Though 36 years old at the time of his reincarnation, he now appeared to be in his 20s. He worked at a home center, and his hobbies were games. He urgently demanded to confirm his identity. Still reeling, he questioned if this was merely a dream, but the goddess firmly stated it was reality, and he had no right to refuse. He vehemently denied any involvement, asking what this situation even was. He remained bewildered, uttering a confused sound. The goddess, a subtle smile playing on her lips, then asked if he would be uneasy going to another world as he was. With a decisive gesture, she declared she would grant him a blessing. She proudly presented him with 3 skill grant tickets. He, however, was taken aback, having imagined a blessing would entail a legendary weapon or powerful magic. He questioned if she truly understood his hobby, which was games. Her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, she confirmed that he could indeed acquire skills by using these tickets. He, now equally excited, eagerly asked if he could use them immediately. Just as his excitement peaked, a new, taller goddess with reddish-brown hair suddenly appeared, accusing Victinia-sama of making a mistake. The newcomer, addressing Victinia-sama as Hera-sama, apologized to the young man and politely asked to borrow Victinia-sama for a private conversation. Victinia-sama looked startled and slightly guilty as Hera held up a hand, revealing 8 tickets. Hera then turned to the young man, apologizing for the inconvenience caused by the people who made the bet. She introduced herself as Hera, explaining that she and her husband, Zeus, were truly sorry for the trouble they had caused him. Victinia-sama also offered a meek apology. Hera clarified that the young man was supposed to be helped by a blessing, which was originally the fulfillment of a god's contract. He gasped in disbelief, recognizing the names Zeus and Hera from Greek mythology. She continued, explaining that after he was sent into the new world, even gods could not interfere directly. However, they could ensure he understood the language of that new world. Internally, he branded Victinia-sama a useless goddess. Hera then exposed Victinia-sama's true intentions, revealing that she had wanted to take a cut of the blessing tickets she received from betting with her husband. Victinia-sama had originally intended to give him only 3 of the 8 tickets she possessed. Victinia-sama, flustered, pretended not to hear the accusation. He stood before a peculiar slot machine, which the goddess Victinias explained was a divine poker game for granting skills. She clarified that while individual tickets could be used, rolling 10 at once would grant an extra bonus. He readily agreed to this method. Moments later, Hera, the other goddess, intervened, offering an additional ticket as compensation for the trouble caused by her husband. She also stated that Victinias would provide another as an apology, bringing his total to 10 tickets. Victinias then sternly reminded him of the privilege of receiving skills, urging him to be sincerely grateful. With the goddess's approval, he, now holding 11 tickets, enthusiastically declared the start of his skill rolls, pulling the machine's lever with a determined grin. The machine whirred, revealing his first acquired skills: appraisal at level 3, masonry at level 4, and dismantling at level 2. Hera remarked on his initial good fortune. His rolls continued, granting him mining at level 3 and leatherworking at level 3. Victinias observed, pondering if he was destined to be a craftsman specializing in wood or stone. The next set of skills appeared: the unique item box, blacksmithing at level 2, and crafting at level 3. Finally, the last of his basic skills were revealed: healing magic at level 1 and logging at level 1. Hera expressed concern, noting the generally low levels of his acquired abilities, while Victinias looked on with a surprised expression. The ultimate skill, a 3D hologram map spanning 3,000 years, then materialized. Hera admitted she was at a loss for words regarding his collection of skills. As the skill granting concluded, the young man noticed both goddesses sweating profusely and inquired about their discomfort. Victinias, ignoring his question, simply stated that the process was over and they would now send him to his new world. Victinias then leaned in, her expression intensely serious, and warned him that the skill tickets were incredibly rare, typically only created when a god and a human bore a child. She declared she would never forgive him if he died, especially after receiving 10 such precious items. Confused, he asked what she meant by the magic scene and the implications of her words. She continued, her voice firm, explaining that in his new world, if he did not kill his adversaries, they would surely kill him. She urged him to gather his courage and resolve himself to do what was necessary for survival, leaving him with a look of profound shock. He lay on the ground, his body aching, gazing at the lifeless hobgoblin before him. A stark realization settled in. There was no room for hesitation in this new, brutal world. A profound silence followed the recent struggle, punctuated only by the faint sounds of the forest. Moments later, as he sat up, Goddess_1 advised him not to rush, reminding him that all he needed to do was think about opening his status. Goddess_2, meanwhile, commended his efforts, suggesting it was time to review his current state. He focused his will, and with a surge of determination, commanded his status screen to appear. The holographic display materialized, revealing his name, Narumi Masaru, and his occupation as a traveler. To his astonishment, his level had increased from 1 to 6, and all his core attributes, vitality, magic, strength, endurance, spirit, agility, and luck, had seen significant boosts. He understood then that this was a world where strength was gained through experience points. He then mentioned that a girl he had met earlier should be returning soon. Goddess_1 expressed surprise, noting that humans were not common in this area. Goddess_2, however, suggested moving him to the nearest village, remarking that the encounter with the goblins served as a valuable lesson. Goddess_1, clearly agitated, demanded to know why he was bringing a human to the village, asserting that she was busy. He quickly clarified that the girl was not human, but a bunny-eared individual from the rabbit race. A small, shocked image of the bunny-eared girl appeared. Just then, Goddess_2 intervened, greeting Goddess_1 and warning her not to interfere with his choices. He was reminded that he was now in a different world and was free to live as he pleased. He then inquired about Goddess_1's earlier comments, but Goddess_2 simply dismissed them, telling him not to mind her. Suddenly, a group of rabbit-eared folk, led by the young bunny-eared girl, emerged from the forest, calling out to him. He embraced the girl, assuring her he was safe. The other rabbit folk quickly noticed the fallen hobgoblin, questioning where the stray goblin had gone. The rabbit folk expressed their astonishment that he had been alone and managed to defeat the creature. He, however, humbly explained that it wasn't entirely his doing. The hobgoblin had stumbled, hit its head on a rock, and he had merely avoided its attacks before delivering the finishing blow. He stood with the bunny-eared girl and two smaller rabbit folk around a small, crackling fire, the night air cool around them. As the group gathered, he pondered his next steps, wondering aloud what he should do from that point forward. The bunny-eared girl, looking up at him with wide eyes, then asked if he could live in their village, while two adult rabbit folk observed the exchange. His face lit up with surprise and joy at the suggestion. One of the adult rabbit folk, a man with long, light hair, confirmed their decision to welcome him if he was in trouble, suggesting they discuss the details on their journey to the village. The other adult rabbit folk, a woman with a spear, expressed their gratitude, thanking him for protecting the bunny-eared girl from the hobgoblin and acknowledging that he had risked his life for her. The bunny-eared girl then reminded him that he had not yet told her his name. He acknowledged her point, stating that he understood he would be introduced to their chief. With a bright smile, the bunny-eared girl extended her hand and introduced herself, declaring, "My name is May. Nice to meet you, Oni-chan." He repeated her name softly, a look of realization dawning on his face. May then stated it was his turn to introduce himself. He hesitated for a moment, asking if something was wrong, but she quickly reassured him that she was fine. With a confident smile, he finally revealed his full name, "I'm Narumi Masaru." As they walked through the forest, hand in hand, he told her to simply call him Masaru, the setting sun casting long shadows behind them. He reflected on his new existence, acknowledging that his path ahead was full of uncertainty, but resolved that his life in this other world was just beginning. Nagaru, a 26-year-old man from a rural home center, found himself recounting the extraordinary events that led him to this new world. He had been summoned by the goddess Victinus, a divine being whose presence was marked by a shower of feathers. His life, he realized, had been irrevocably altered by her intervention, regardless of the circumstances. He recalled his initial moments in this unfamiliar realm, where he possessed no knowledge of its ways. A massive skill selection interface had appeared before him, granting him 11 abilities, yet none of them were offensive in nature. Right after his arrival, he had been ambushed by a grotesque goblin, a creature he honestly believed would be his end. Just as despair threatened to consume him, a young woman with rabbit ears, May, appeared, calling out to him with a cheerful, "We're here, Oni-chan." He looked on in astonishment, his hand instinctively shielding his eyes from the sun as he took in the sight of Rabbit's village entrance. His life, against all odds, had been saved. May, beaming, gestured towards the collection of tents and structures, declaring that this was where they all lived, marking the true beginning of his new life. As he walked among the rabbit-eared villagers, he observed their simple way of life. May explained that their village, with a population of about 100, thrived on mutual support, everyone helping each other to survive. He expressed his gratitude to May, who, with a gentle smile, encouraged him to consider all the villagers as his own family. The village itself was a rudimentary settlement, its houses mere tents supported by ropes and shafts. A sturdy fence, constructed from logs tied tightly together, encircled the community, reminiscent of ancient Jamin and Yayoi-era structures. He pondered if this was a newly established settlement, but May quickly clarified that they had been there for approximately 2 years. A deep concern settled over him as he realized they were struggling significantly. Another villager then suggested that he first meet with the village chief. He found himself inside the village chief's house, a space adorned with various tools and a large deer skull. The chief, a man with long, light hair and rabbit ears, greeted him warmly, recognizing him as Narumi Masaru-kan. He was surprised, having heard rumors that the chief was human, but found him to be quite young. He internally noted that he hadn't believed the rumors until now. As the chief sat on the floor, Nagaru expressed his gratitude for being saved and offered his help in any way he could. The chief, with a reassuring smile, told him not to worry, dismissing his concerns. Nagaru, however, insisted that he would have been utterly lost if left alone. The chief then thanked Nagaru for risking his life to save May and formally welcomed him to the village, reiterating his personal thanks. He continued, explaining that due to some hasty decisions, Nagaru would be living at May's house from that point forward. Nagaru, surprised by the arrangement, repeated May's house. The chief clarified that May's father had been killed by a monster when she was young, and she currently lived with her mother, who needed some help. May, standing nearby, beamed with joy, exclaiming that it was perfectly fine if her Oni-chan was staying. He acknowledged her enthusiasm, gently patting her head and thanking her. The chief, observing the interaction, reassured Nagaru not to worry and to simply do whatever he could at his own pace. The chief then asked what he could do for the village. Nagaru, still new to this world, internally mused that there shouldn't be much he was capable of. As he considered his limitations, Nagaru found himself observing the village, taking in its various sights and sounds. He saw the daily life unfolding around him. He continued to survey the bustling community, noticing the different activities and structures that made up the rabbit-eared people's home. His gaze swept over more of the village's daily routines, even spotting a villager operating a piece of machinery, a tractor, amidst the rustic setting. Suddenly, a profound realization struck him, and he exclaimed aloud that there was indeed something he could do. He understood that if he properly considered his skills, he could contribute. May, hearing his outburst, asked if he was all right. Standing before May and the chief, he boldly asked if he could improve the entire village. May looked on with wide-eyed surprise, while the chief's expression became one of thoughtful consideration. The chief acknowledged his ambition, confirming his desire for improvement, but then cautioned him. He explained that while such aspirations were admirable, a newcomer expressing a desire to completely transform the village could cause considerable panic. Nagaru, realizing his social misstep, admitted he was slow to grasp the nuances of the situation. Despite the chief's warning, Nagaru's resolve remained firm. He reflected on his past, remembering how he was often reprimanded at work and how he had inadvertently put children in danger earlier. He felt a strong desire to be helpful, believing that if he left things as they were, he would regret it later. He wanted to do everything he could to ensure a safer life for everyone in the village. He passionately declared that even if he didn't know his exact capabilities, he would do his absolute best for the sake of the village. The chief, observing Nagaru's earnest plea, recognized the immense hope and potential within him. With Nagaru's commitment now clear, the chief, standing confidently amidst a scattering of arrows, directly challenged him, asking what he planned to do first. He received the chief's full support, who affirmed that he had seen Nagaru's true desire in his eyes and that his intentions were good. Nagaru, with May by his side, expressed his gratitude and reiterated his commitment to doing his best for the village. He reflected on the conversation, acknowledging that he had indeed conveyed his earnest desire to them. Moments later, Nagaru found himself outside the village fence, in a designated forest gathering area. He knew that before he could truly contribute, he needed to assess his own capabilities and understand what skills he possessed. As he prepared to begin, he realized he had several skills he couldn't recall ever having. He pondered if these were his original abilities, or if the stuff he could create had somehow changed since he acquired skills from the slot machine. His eyes widened in surprise as he activated Appraisal 3 on a simple knife he held, revealing its properties. He marveled at the usefulness of these skills, noting that they required no prior training, experience, or knowledge. He remembered borrowing the knife from May and hoped he wouldn't break it. Then, his thoughts turned to what other abilities he might possess. He focused on a skill labeled Cutting Level 1, which was described as an ability to cut trees, essential for success, and notably, usable without any tools. With a determined expression, he stood before a large tree, raising his hand to activate the newly discovered cutting skill. The tree trunk was cleanly severed, crashing to the ground. Nagaru, startled by the sudden power, checked his status and realized he had used 1/6 of his 213 MP, exclaiming that the experience had been surprisingly dangerous. He mused that while the cutting skill itself didn't seem overly complicated, achieving more intricate results would likely require a higher level. A new idea then struck him, and he decided to test out his building skills next. He began to test his building skills, starting with Masonry Level 4. With a focused expression, he concentrated, and a small, perfect cube of stone materialized in his hand, accompanied by crumbling debris. He considered the implications, wondering if he could create larger structures without issue, or if they would become too unwieldy. Next, he turned his attention to the log he had previously felled, intending to dry it using his Woodworking Level 4 skill. He understood that would naturally loses moisture and dries over time, but if left unattended, it could become troublesome to use as a material. He wanted to compare the efficiency of his skill against natural drying processes. He calculated that while some trees might take 2 to 3 years to dry naturally, others only a month or 2. Even with industrial methods, drying wood could take half a year to a full year. His skill, however, promised to accelerate this process dramatically, making it far more efficient than any conventional method. With a determined look, he prepared himself, ready to fully engage his newfound abilities. As he worked, May's voice echoed through the forest, calling out to him. She informed him that dinner was ready and her mother had sent her to fetch him. Moments later, May found him collapsed beside the massive log, looking utterly drained. She cried out in alarm, asking what on earth he had done, noting he appeared even worse than after his encounter with the goblins. He weakly reassured her that he was safe. She gently touched his cheek, her concern evident. He realized this profound exhaustion was the mana shortage he had only read about in books, acknowledging that attempting anything larger would have been far too taxing. Despite his depleted state, he looked at the now perfectly dried log, realizing he had managed to complete the task without truly overstraining himself. May, still worried, urged him to return home for dinner, and he felt a pang of shame for his sudden collapse. Upon their arrival at May's house, a woman with long, light blonde hair and rabbit ears, May's mother, Ruru, greeted them warmly, welcoming May back home. Nagaru then formally introduced himself to Ruru, who expressed her gratitude for him saving May and the village from the goblins, announcing a grand feast in his honor. Ruru, with a kind smile, acknowledged their humble dwelling but assured Nagaru it offered shelter from the elements. She then extended a heartfelt invitation, asking him to consider their home his own and make himself comfortable. He accepted her hospitality with a grateful okay. He found himself seated at a low table, sharing a meal with May and Ruru. A profound sense of belonging settled over him as he realized he could truly live in this new world, all thanks to the kindness of these rabbit people. Later, as he stretched in bed, he admitted to himself that he had no clear idea of the full extent of what he could do for them. Yet, a firm resolve took root. He would dedicate all his might to whatever task lay ahead, while May and Ruru continued their meal nearby. His eyes gleamed with determination as he declared his intention to begin this new life, starting definitively the very next day. Under the soft glow of the moon, the rabbit people's village lay nestled, awaiting the dawn of a new day and the implementation of a grand improvement plan. Wednesday arrived, marking the beginning of a significant undertaking at the rabbit's village entrance. After much deliberation, the building process was finally commencing, a tangible step in Nagaru's new life. He wasted no time, immediately declaring that the first order of business would be to reinforce the existing fence. A nearby villager, perhaps the chief, confirmed the chosen location was suitable, to which Nagaru confidently affirmed. As the villagers gathered, their excitement was palpable. They had heard from the chief about Nagaru's extensive plans for improvements, and many expressed their eagerness, having been thrilled since his arrival. He explained his reasoning, stating that prioritizing safety was crucial. Reinforcing the fence would ensure the village wouldn't suffer serious damage even if attacked by monsters, despite the goblins being relatively easy to defeat. With a confident gesture, he then unveiled his specific plan to construct a stone guard from the base of the wooden fence, extending deep into the ground. To address the immediate need for materials, he revealed that he had already visited the nearby cliff with May that morning, bringing back a substantial amount of stone. This would make the fence much stronger, he assured them. While the villagers acknowledged the strength, some worried about the sheer manpower required to collect enough stone for the entire village perimeter. With a flash of light, he materialized a massive pile of stones, demonstrating his item box skill. The villagers gasped in astonishment, realizing that the manpower issue was now resolved. Some whispered about the rarity of such a skill, while Nagaru, overhearing them, wondered if it truly was that unusual, as it hadn't seemed so when he first acquired it. Having provided the necessary materials, he prepared to begin the construction, reminding himself to be mindful of how often he displayed his unique skill. As they began moving the heavy stones, the chief quickly intervened, cautioning Nagaru that simply placing them haphazardly would cause the structure to crumble. He explained that the stones needed to be positioned in a specific, deliberate manner, prompting Nagaru to consider this new, crucial information. He surveyed the newly constructed section of the stone wall, noting its completion. The visible exterior, he explained, was merely the surface. The true strength lay in the hidden structure behind the rocks. He contrasted it with the previous, weaker fence, which had used smaller, thinner stones and could easily be breached by an attack. He demonstrated how the intentional gaps created while placing stones on top of each other were not random, but served a specific purpose in the construction. The chief absorbed this information, realizing that these carefully managed gaps would make the walls significantly sturdier and far less prone to collapse. He continued, suggesting that if the intensity of attacks escalated, they might need to incorporate pebbles into the design. A rabbit villager then inquired if there were any other crucial steps beyond simply erecting the wall. Nagaru elaborated on the technique, explaining that larger stones should form the outside layer, while pebbles would fill the interior. This design would allow rainwater to pass through easily, preventing it from compromising the wall's integrity and maintaining its strength even during heavy rainfall. He stressed that this was why using pebbles was an excellent idea. He declared their goal was to eliminate any gaps between the stones, a fundamental technique for building a strong wall. He then offered to personally teach everyone the proper methods for constructing a robust defense, asking for their cooperation. Moments later, Nagaru sheepishly admitted his lack of skill in teaching, hoping they would still manage to understand his instructions, letting out a nervous chuckle. Both the chief and May looked on with surprise. May, accompanied by other rabbit villagers, approached him, eager to know how he managed to conceive such wonderful ideas seemingly out of nowhere. Considering their question, Nagaru mused aloud about constructing a furnace to assist with cooking, recalling that the villagers primarily used fire for that purpose. The villagers listened intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Suddenly, the female villagers, including May and Ruru, transformed, their eyes glowing ominously as they collectively demanded he make the cooking area safer. Nagaru, sensing the shift in atmosphere, realized he should not incur the wrath of these demons of the kitchen, understanding their request as an undeniable order rather than a mere question. He recoiled slightly, attempting to explain that since he would be using stones to construct the furnace, it should pose no significant challenge. The women, however, remained unyielding in their intense demand. Despite his explanation, they burst into laughter, acknowledging that he now understood the true difficulty involved in cooking. He could only offer a strained, nervous laugh in return. Moments later, he stood with May, observing the group of women who had gathered in the village field, where large cooking pots already sat. He then turned to them, a smile gracing his lips, and declared that he would handle the majority of the heavy lifting for the furnace construction, but gently requested their assistance with some of the tasks. Ruru, ever practical, inquired about other necessary materials beyond stone. He confirmed that he would need quite a few more and would rely on their help to gather them. The women, including May, responded with enthusiastic agreement, assuring him they would take care of it. He then began to list the essential components: clay, grass, and sand. May, puzzled, asked why clay was needed and why grass and sand were also required. He patiently explained that clay would be mixed into the structure, making it much easier to work with than just stone, and that it would also strengthen the overall construction. He further elaborated, illustrating that while clay alone possessed a weak structure, mixing grass and sand into it would create a strong bond, significantly enhancing its durability. May, now understanding, exclaimed that she had not known such a technique. Ruru, taking charge, instructed Nagaru to leave the gathering to her, and then directed May to begin collecting the materials with a few other villagers. As he considered the next steps, Ruru and the other women approached him with new suggestions, wondering if it would also be possible to have tables, chairs, forks, and spoons for the entire rabbit village. He felt a pang of worry about the amount of mana such creations would consume, but believed his skills would still allow him to accomplish the task. He confidently declared his ability to construct the requested items, though he admitted it might take a couple of days. Ruru, standing beside him, expressed her unwavering belief in his capabilities. As he considered the task, a villager inquired if anything was amiss. Another suggested transforming the current gathering spot into a roofed area for communal meals. This sparked a new idea in Nagaru's mind. The villagers, particularly Ruru, were deeply impressed, marveling at Nagaru's amazing skills in building and his vast knowledge. He humbly dismissed their praise, insisting it was merely normal work. May, her curiosity piqued, pressed him to reveal the kind of work he had done. He vaguely replied that it was just things he remembered from his past, from back home. He elaborated, explaining that he had simply worked as any normal person would at a countryside home center. With renewed enthusiasm, he declared their intention to construct many things together, emphasizing the need for everyone's help. The villagers responded with excited cheers, eager to contribute. True to his word, Nagaru led the villagers in a flurry of construction. He effortlessly hoisted massive stones, his strength surprising a nearby villager as they began to erect the new structures. The work progressed swiftly, with a sturdy wooden frame now standing tall. Nagaru knelt, meticulously mixing materials, while other villagers continued to assemble the framework, their collective efforts transforming the landscape. Later, as the new furnace glowed in the background, Nagaru and Mei shared a meal. He casually used his chopsticks to pick his nose, a sight that left Mei utterly shocked. His work continued, now focused on crafting a table and chairs. However, his efforts were interrupted when a playful rabbit villager climbed precariously onto a wooden beam, causing Nagaru to clutch his head in exasperation. He continued his arduous work, carrying a heavy wooden beam across his shoulder, his brow furrowed with effort. The village chief and Ruru observed his progress, their expressions a mix of anticipation and admiration. As he moved through the village, other villagers, including Mei, watched him, some carrying their own materials, contributing to the ongoing construction. The outlines of a new, sturdy fence began to take shape in the background. The village chief watched with a knowing smile, his eyes reflecting satisfaction at the progress being made. Finally, the massive wooden fence, reinforced with a stone base, stood complete. He gazed upon his handiwork with pride, a triumphant exclamation escaping his lips. The villagers cheered, celebrating their collective achievement, acknowledging that they had built it with their own hands, thanks to Nagaru. Elsewhere, the newly constructed roofed dining area buzzed with activity. Villagers gathered, happily eating their meals, many skillfully using the chopsticks Nagaru had introduced. Ruru and another villager marveled at the sturdy construction, praising the amazing roofed gathering area and the strong, helpful furnace Nagaru had built. He noted that while his forks were less popular, the chopsticks he introduced were a hit, bringing him contentment. Just then, the chief approached, and Nagaru expressed his happiness at seeing him. The chief, in turn, stated he needed to thank Nagaru personally, acknowledging that everything good happening in the village was thanks to him. The chief, Ruru, and the other villagers extended their hands in a gesture of profound gratitude, their faces beaming with sincere appreciation for Nagaru's efforts. Mei, overcome with joy, rushed to embrace him, exclaiming that he had truly succeeded and that the entire plan had been a massive success. He held her close, a warm smile gracing his lips, both looking content and proud amidst the thriving village they had helped to build. High above the mortal realm, two goddesses shared tea. One, with long, light brown hair, calmly observed the situation, remarking that even without their direct intervention, everything seemed to be progressing well. Her companion, Victinus, with dark hair, looked thoughtful, acknowledging that her recent actions might not have been strictly necessary. Still deep in thought, Victinus then expressed a hint of frustration, admitting she had bestowed skills upon him, but found him incredibly stubborn. The other goddess, however, simply dismissed her concerns, assuring her that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. Her companion, Harasama, continued to muse, stating that Nagaru, having obtained more skills than a normal person should possess, typically only one or two, should no longer exist in his current form. She recalled seeing him at Zeus's domain, hinting at his unusual origins or development. Harasama then voiced her profound dislike for the world's stagnation, which had persisted for over 400 years, and her reluctance to congratulate Nagaru for disrupting it. She pondered what course of action they should take if his unusual development continued. With a determined gaze, Victinus declared that Nagaru needed to embrace his destined role as their detonator, a catalyst to ignite change in their stagnant world. A fleeting image of Nagaru and Mei appeared in her mind. Meanwhile, back in the village, the newly constructed dining area stood complete, a testament to Nagaru's skill. Villagers gathered, marveling at the structure and praising Masaru for his impressive work. Seated at the table with Mei and other villagers, Nagaru humbly dismissed their compliments, stating the work was not much, but he had even more plans in store. The chief, expressing deep gratitude, acknowledged that thanks to Nagaru, they could now live a safer life than ever before. As he continued to eat, Nagaru pondered further improvements, considering strengthening the houses with wooden slabs and even building a toilet. He realized the village had the potential to become a city, and decided he needed to prioritize constructing the toilet quickly. Then, with a more serious demeanor, Nagaru turned to the assembled villagers. He prefaced his next question by acknowledging his understanding that this was indeed a fantasy world. He then directly asked the villagers if there were any slimes nearby, his question hanging in the air, leaving them visibly surprised. He pressed for more information about the slimes, asking if they truly existed. Ruru confirmed their presence, explaining that while the monsters lived beneath the cliff and could not ascend, they were incredibly dangerous, capable of melting anything they touched. His eyes widened in surprise at the confirmation. He expressed relief that the slimes could not climb the cliff, finding comfort in the fact that his initial assessment was correct. Meanwhile, the village chief, observing the ongoing discussion, interjected, stating that his current concern was explaining proper hygiene to everyone in the village. He then considered the possibility of creating Samwa soil, a material he knew would require specific components. May, standing beside him, remarked that cement might not be the best choice for his plans. He paused, then inquired if there was an ocean nearby, explaining that he had seen people on television attempting to create something from scratch using gravel and sand. Ruru confirmed that there was indeed an ocean. His expression shifted to one of surprise, a slight huh, escaping his lips as he processed the information. May and Ruru exchanged a serious glance, their demeanors suggesting a deeper implication to the ocean's proximity. Ruru then revealed the reason for their somber expressions. Everyone in the village had fled from the area near the ocean. His eyes widened in shock, a sense of unease settling over him as he wondered what could have caused such a mass exodus. Nagaru listened intently as the rabbit people, including May and the chief, spoke of a distant ocean. They revealed that they had once lived there, a journey of about 10 days southwest from their current village, before something forced them to flee. Nagaru's eyes widened in surprise at this revelation. The chief, his face contorted in distress, covered his eyes with his hands as he recounted how they had been driven away from that place by humans. Nagaru's expression grew somber as he processed the information, realizing that his earlier suspicions about their past were indeed true. He apologized for inadvertently bringing up such painful memories, acknowledging that despite being human, the rabbit people had graciously accepted him into their village. Feeling a deep sense of gratitude and obligation, he declared his intention to work towards improving their lives. To achieve this, he explained, he would need to gather specific materials from the vicinity of the ocean. Nagaru then clarified that he would not ask them for assistance with this task, understanding that the ocean held only bad memories for them. With a determined look, he announced his plan to undertake the journey to the ocean entirely by himself, much to the surprise of May and the other villagers. His face alight with resolve, he reiterated his destination, to the ocean. As Nagaru prepared for his new endeavor, the goddess Victinus observed, while he and May began gathering materials for various DIY projects, marking the start of his quest for resources. The next morning, as Nagaru stood at the entrance of the rabbit village, ready to depart, he was met with an unexpected presence. It was May, sitting on the ground with her hands and feet bound, looking up at him with a stubborn pout. He questioned her, asking why she was so insistent on accompanying him. Still bound, May defiantly insisted on accompanying Nagaru, arguing that he lacked the strength to even defeat a single goblin. Her mother, Ruru, then questioned Nagaru, asking if he truly intended to leave her alone. May continued her protest, pointing out Nagaru's own limited combat prowess, claiming his previous victory over goblins was merely due to their clumsiness. He could only groan in exasperation. The village chief then intervened, instructing May to heed Nagaru's words. However, Nagaru quickly reminded the chief that he had warned against testing one's strength against deadly threats, implying the chief should not have sent him off in the first place. May attempted to speak again. With a knowing smile, the chief revealed he had something to give Nagaru and a favor to ask. Nagaru looked on, surprised by the sudden turn of events. The chief presented Nagaru with a full set of armor, explaining that the favor was for him to inform any humans he encountered that the rabbit people were living safely in their village. Nagaru, now clad in the protective gear, accepted the task and resolved to investigate the true history of the area. He also playfully warned Ruru not to expect any exotic souvenirs upon his return. Fully equipped, Nagaru bid farewell to the village, instructing May to be a good girl and remain home. May watched him depart, tears welling in her eyes as he left her behind. Days later, after a journey through a perilous world where he constantly faced attacks, Nagaru finally reached his destination. Before him lay the vast expanse of the ocean. He reflected on how his map skill had proven invaluable, guiding him and allowing him to grow stronger since his departure. His thoughts then drifted to the day before, a memory of a sudden attack. He recalled his hand reaching out, his face contorted in surprise as he was ambushed by bandits. In the flashback, Nagaru stood confronted by two menacing figures who had overturned his cart. One bandit, with a smug grin, gestured towards the wreckage, while the other, wielding a heavy club, prepared to strike, leaving Nagaru in a state of shock. He swiftly dodged a powerful swing from the bandit's club, narrowly avoiding the blow. The chaotic scene unfolded around him as the assailants continued their relentless assault. He reflected on the recent encounter, noting that the bandits were relatively weak compared to the goblins he had faced before. He had fought them back using the club he acquired earlier, leaving them defeated on the ground. He also recalled the goddess's words from a past conversation, where she had stated that bad people have no rights, a sentiment he remembered seeing in a Bible. Despite this, he still hesitated to take a life. Despite his internal conflict, he extended his hand towards one of the injured bandits, activating a new skill, Healing Magic 1. A soft glow enveloped the bandit, beginning to mend his wounds. He found himself unable to bring himself to kill another person, even a bandit. The bandit, surprised by the unexpected healing, looked up with a mixture of relief and confusion. Having spared their lives, he took the potions and herbs they had in their possession, then simply let them go, continuing his journey through the forest. As he continued his journey, he checked his map, noticing a new signal. He realized he had acquired the map skill, which would prove invaluable for navigation. Eventually, he reached the seaside town, recognizing it as the place May used to live. The town was strangely quiet, its entrance blocked by beasts, and a prominent tower stood empty. He considered whether he should adopt the appearance of an adventurer before entering. His arrival was not unnoticed. As he ventured deeper into the ruined settlement, two goblins emerged from the dilapidated buildings, confronting him with crude weapons. Nagaru found himself surrounded by a group of menacing goblins, their forms silhouetted against the flickering light. He greeted them with a wry, almost desperate smile, realizing that despite any excuses, they would not let him leave. With a frustrated sigh, he braced himself. Though these were mere common goblins, their sheer numbers presented a challenge. Still, he now possessed a sword, and with that, he had no choice but to confront them head-on, challenging them to attack. He lunged forward, his blade a swift arc, striking one of the goblins. He reflected that while he lacked powerful offensive skills or magic, he still retained his swordsmanship, a skill he had acquired. The blow connected, eliciting a pained cry from the goblin. He felt a jolt of surprise, realizing this wasn't a new skill he had received, but rather the kendo he had practiced as a child. The system was recognizing his past life's training as a legitimate skill. He continued his assault, executing a precise wrist strike against another foe. Despite his proficiency, he mused that he hadn't used kendo for killing before, and it felt unfamiliar in that context. As he fought, he faced a larger, more formidable goblin. He felt a surge of confidence, knowing he could handle the weight of the sword and continue the fight. He affirmed his resolve to continue, his expression determined. However, a sudden, immense presence manifested behind him, causing him to turn with a gasp of alarm. The source of the disturbance was a monstrous sight, a heavily armored goblin, larger than any he had seen, riding a colossal, tusked boar. The beast charged directly towards him, its eyes glowing ominously. He quickly dodged the charging beast, leaping away from its path. He wondered if this formidable foe was the village boss, and what possible strategy he could employ against such an overwhelming opponent. The goblin boss, mounted on its massive boar, thundered past him with astonishing speed, leaving him momentarily stunned by the sheer velocity of its charge. He stood his ground, sword drawn, as the monstrous boar, ridden by the menacing goblin boss, charged directly at him with terrifying speed. The sheer force of the charge forced him to evade, narrowly dodging the impact as the beast thundered past. He realized his sword was too short to reach the goblin boss atop the boar, making a direct attack impossible. He considered striking the boar itself, but quickly understood that at such speeds, attempting to stop it would only result in his arms being torn from his body, a fatal traffic accident. A sudden realization struck him, connecting the idea of an accident to his predicament, while the goblin boss, still charging, seemed to register his words with a confused snarl. He watched the boar's relentless charge, moving like a speeding car, and knew he had to find a way to stop it immediately. With a determined grin, he activated his item box, summoning a massive log, a leftover from a construction site, and hurled it directly into the path of the charging boar, aiming to halt its momentum. The goblin boss reacted with a surprised snarl. He braced himself, planting his sword firmly into the ground, his knuckles white with effort, preparing for the inevitable impact. Meanwhile, the other goblins, witnessing the sudden appearance of the log, looked on with bewildered expressions. With the immediate threat addressed, he stood ready, a confident smirk on his face, declaring that only these small fries remained. He watched, aghast, as several goblins, startled by the sudden appearance of the massive log, began to flee. A chilling realization dawned on him. If they managed to call for reinforcements, the situation would escalate dramatically. He called out, attempting to stop their retreat, even as other goblins continued their charge. Suddenly, a volley of arrows rained down from above, striking the charging goblins with brutal force. The projectiles pierced their crude armor and flesh, causing them to shriek in pain and fall. He looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and confusion, as the unexpected intervention unfolded. From the direction of the arrows, a contingent of armored knights emerged, led by a formidable figure on horseback. The leading knight, his voice authoritative, demanded Nagaru identify himself, proclaiming his own identity as the vice-captain of the Gratis Kingdom army. Nagaru stared, stunned by the sudden appearance of royal forces. A contingent of knights on horseback arrived, announcing themselves as the knights from the Gratis Kingdom. Their general, a light-haired man, stepped forward, apologizing for any rudeness from his men and stating their purpose, to exterminate the goblins. He then questioned the lone figure before him, Nagaru, about his identity. The general observed the defeated goblins scattered across the ground and remarked that they were a little late, asking Nagaru if he had accomplished all of this by himself. Nagaru introduced himself as Masaru, explaining he had come to the village for resources, and then inquired about the kingdom that had taken over the village. The general's knights looked on, surprised by Nagaru's casual demeanor. He acknowledged a report about a formidable goblin rider, expressing his surprise that Nagaru had managed to defeat such an opponent, one they considered difficult to take down. The general, still reeling from the revelation, began to rapidly interrogate Nagaru, asking about his age, his job, his skills, and if he came from a nearby village, noting that he looked like a local. Nagaru simply confirmed that he was indeed from a close village. With a wide, almost predatory smile, The general then offered Nagaru a position among the knights, citing his tremendous strength. Nagaru internally recognized this as a familiar trope from stories he knew. Nagaru politely declined the offer, explaining that he already had a role and purpose, which was the very reason he had traveled so far. The general's expression shifted to one of surprise. He clarified his true desires: money, wealth, women, and fame, wanting other soldiers to look up to him. The general, impressed by such a strong will, praised him heartily. The general then ordered one of his knights to go call the villagers, assuring Nagaru that they should be sheltering nearby. Nagaru, however, questioned where everyone had gone, implying the village was deserted. Nagaru then turned to the general, asking for assistance in clearing the goblin corpses. The general and his knight looked at him in disbelief, wondering what he intended to do with the bodies. He explained the necessity of proper disposal, stating that leaving the bodies to rot could cause illness and attract monsters and wolves. He proposed digging a hole, burning the corpses, and then burying them. The general agreed to gather his men to collect the bodies, while Nagaru pondered if the knights had a role or purpose that extended beyond their kingdom's direct orders. He stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock, as if witnessing something utterly unbelievable unfold before him. Meanwhile, in a distant realm, the goddess Victinus and Hera reacted with similar alarm, their expressions mirroring the same profound disbelief as they questioned what could possibly be happening. Victinus, still reeling, asked Hera to review the events, specifically questioning the identity of the figures from the Gratis Kingdom. Hera admitted she did not know and suggested they consult Hera-sama for answers. As they continued to observe, Hera remarked that while goblins were typically weak, they should still have been able to defeat Masaru. She expressed disbelief that he could have taken down the group's leader, who was a goblin rider. Victinus then wondered if something had happened when Zeus-sama had given Masaru his body, noting that he seemed unusually normal for a summoned person. She urgently requested to see Masaru's documents, which revealed his impressive past achievements, ranked top 8 in Kendo in 3rd grade, and 2nd in boxing for the states in high school. Suddenly, a profound realization dawned upon Victinus as she pointed at the document, understanding the deeper implications of Masaru's past. She lamented the unexpected turn of events, acknowledging that Masaru's body had been somewhat unusual when he was summoned. Hera, however, countered that the true problem lay with Victinus's world itself. Victinus swallowed hard, expressing her fear that if they left him as he was, their world would face dire consequences. Hera grimly agreed, stating that this was the worst-case scenario, especially since Victinus had intended him to be a detonator or something similar. Hera then delivered the chilling pronouncement: the world would be destroyed. Unaware of the cosmic implications of his existence, Nagaru sat calmly among the Gratis Kingdom knights, who were now gathered around him, seemingly ready to depart. The villagers, now safe from the goblin threat, expressed their profound gratitude to the knights, relieved that they could once again live freely in their homes. The village chief, his face beaming with relief, led the chorus of thanks. He, the village chief, then turned to Nagaru, acknowledging that the young man was the one who had truly defeated all the goblins. The knight captain, standing nearby, confirmed Nagaru's prowess, calling it amazing. The chief, shaking Nagaru's hand, thanked him from the bottom of his heart, expressing his gladness that Nagaru was safe and that they could now return to their work. As the conversation continued, the knight captain suggested that instead of forming a contract, they should give Nagaru something as a reward. Nagaru, surprised by the offer, hesitated slightly but admitted that if they insisted, he would not refuse, acknowledging that the knights had done all the work and suffered no casualties. However, the village chief interjected, explaining that as their village was in ruins, they would be unable to properly reward him. He then turned to the knights, asking if they could help give Nagaru something instead. Nagaru looked on, slightly taken aback by the turn of events. Nagaru, considering the situation, stated that he did not need any money. Instead, he asked if they had any water bottles and wooden boxes, explaining that he needed to collect seawater and seashells. The knight captain, standing beside him, confirmed that Nagaru was fine with this unusual request. The knight captain, still somewhat confused, questioned if Nagaru's true goal was resources, recalling that he had mentioned coming to the area for that purpose. Nagaru, looking away, admitted he couldn't really explain it, but stated it was for a dirt wall. Another knight, observing the exchange, suggested to the knight captain that they simply give Nagaru what he wanted, as a token of gratitude for saving the village. The captain, still pondering Nagaru's strange request, seemed to consider the advice. The village chief, however, expressed concern about the water bottles, explaining that they needed those jugs to carry water from the ocean to the village, and losing some would be problematic. He then offered to give Nagaru a bit of a reason to reconsider, a sly smile spreading across his face. Nagaru and the knight captain both reacted with confusion, uttering a questioning "huh?" The village chief, with a knowing look, then asked Nagaru if he truly didn't need to carry water to the village. Nagaru, still puzzled, watched as the village chief pointed towards a well situated right next to Nagaru's garden, revealing that he already possessed a convenient source of water. The chief's expression was one of subtle amusement at Nagaru's oversight. He had just revealed his unusual request for seawater, but the village chief's counter-revelation of a nearby well immediately shifted the attention of the assembled knights and villagers. One knight, his face etched with disbelief, confirmed he had just seen the well himself, located past a small alley. Another knight questioned if this was indeed the chief Garv they knew. The knight who had confirmed the well's existence was then questioned on how he knew its location. The captain, his expression hardening, declared that with this new information, the situation would change. He angrily pointed out that the village was supposedly suffering from a lack of water and crops, making the existence of a hidden well a critical piece of information that should have been disclosed. His anger escalating, the captain confronted the villagers, who attempted to deny his accusations. He furiously accused one of them of being the informant who had revealed the well's existence to the knights, threatening dire consequences for the entire village if it were to be erased. Another villager, attempting to deflect the blame, suggested that the captain should be confronting the chief instead. Ignoring the villager's plea, the captain lashed out violently, striking the man with a brutal blow. The villager cried out in pain and outrage, cursing his attacker as he reeled from the impact. The knight captain, bound and kneeling amidst other similarly restrained villagers, accused Nagaru of orchestrating the chaos that had just unfolded. Nagaru, however, merely scoffed, asserting that the goblins had proven more formidable than anticipated. As the discussion continued, the other knight captain speculated that the attackers had intended not only to eliminate Nagaru, but also to conceal a crucial secret. Nagaru then turned his gaze back to the kneeling knight captain, pressing him on his next course of action. The knight captain, his face contorted in horror, declared that under normal circumstances, he would execute those responsible for concealing the well and farm, and for launching an attack. He then presented a grim alternative, condemning them to slavery. The bound villagers, including the knight captain, recoiled in terror at the suggestion, desperately pleading against such a horrific fate. Nagaru watched their reactions intently. A subtle smirk played upon Nagaru's lips, a clear sign that he had a scheme in motion. He then placed a hand on the knight captain's shoulder, proposing a deal, which left the captain looking surprised and bewildered. With a confident smile, Nagaru declared his willingness to forget this happened. The other knight captain, observing the exchange, questioned if this meant no punishment would be dealt if the victim consented. Nagaru then clarified his terms. He sought answers to a few questions and a favor, the specifics of which would depend on their responses. The knight captain, now addressed as Masarodano, looked up, inquiring about the precise condition. With a knowing look, Nagaru asked if they should commence, while the other knight captain watched, pondering Nagaru's true intentions. He pressed the captured knight captain for answers, demanding to know what had happened to the village's previous inhabitants. The captain, looking distressed, revealed that 2 years prior, the village had been owned by the rabbit people. As the interrogation continued, the knight captain, still bound, grew increasingly agitated, questioning Nagaru's methods and calling out to someone named Garv. One of Nagaru's knights, standing nearby, also expressed concern about the nature of the questioning. The knight captain then desperately called out to another figure, a stern-faced knight named Eldam, who stood nearby, observing the scene with a grim expression. Nagaru, maintaining his composure, explained that he would answer their questions once his own had been addressed. He emphasized that he had people who believed in him, implying a deeper purpose behind his inquiries. Eldam listened intently. Eldam, now kneeling before Nagaru, confirmed the knight captain's earlier statement, acknowledging that the previous inhabitants were indeed the rabbit people. Nagaru recognized Eldam's strength, stating that even he would likely lose in a direct confrontation. In response to this acknowledgement, Eldam agreed to speak freely. Eldam began to recount the true history, explaining that it all started 5 years ago when the last king expanded his country, absorbing all nearby states. He continued, detailing how this very village was one of those absorbed states. He and Garv had fought in the battle for this land and emerged victorious. After their conquest, the rabbit people fled, abandoning their homes, and Garv was subsequently appointed as the new chief of the village. Nagaru looked down, absorbing the grim revelation. Eldam clarified that the rabbit people were not captured by pirates, but rather, they were forcibly expelled by humans, by a country, leading to all of them being driven out. He pressed Eldam further, asking about the rabbit people who had not fled the village. Eldam, still kneeling, confessed that they had been captured and taken as slaves. A vivid memory of a rabbit person's despair flashed through Eldam's mind, a stark reminder that even today, the rabbit people still mourned over the lives taken away. He vehemently denied any wrongdoing, shouting that it was not true. Nagaru's expression hardened, his voice rising with a fierce demand for the immediate release of all the rabbit people. Eldam, aghast, protested that such a thing was impossible. Nagaru then clarified his intent, asking if Eldam believed that if he were to defeat all of them now, he could simply take their place as slaves. Standing over the kneeling knight, Nagaru's voice boomed, questioning if following the law allowed them to do anything, and if they were truly permitted to take anyone they wanted as slaves. Eldam, crushed beneath his foot, stammered that the law would not allow it. Nagaru's anger erupted, his face contorted in a furious snarl as he declared that these murderous invaders had no right to speak of justice. The knights remained silent, visibly shaken by Nagaru's outburst and the weight of his accusations. Nagaru then calmed himself, apologizing for raising his voice. He offered Eldam some time to decide what he would do, urging him to make a choice. He turned and walked away, rubbing his head, leaving the knights to ponder his words and their predicament. Suddenly, a powerful blow struck Nagaru from behind, sending him sprawling. Goddess Victinus stood over him, her face etched with anger, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. Still gripping Nagaru, the Goddess Victinus accused him of attempting to destroy a country and make her weep, questioning if his hatred for her ran so deep. She continued her lament, demanding to know why he was shouting at people and trying to engage them in battle, claiming his actions had prevented her from finding the love of her life. He attempted to interject, stating he did not hate her, but pointed out that she had brought him there without his consent. The goddess then shifted her focus, asking if he truly believed she could take on an entire army. She admitted her inability to do so, adding that they wouldn't even fight her and advised him to simply lay low for a while. His expression turning to utter shock, Nagaru demanded to know what she meant and what was happening to his body. She, appearing distressed, wondered aloud if his potential as a goddess was truly so limited, before promising to explain it in simple terms. She then revealed the astonishing truth. He possessed the power to fight an entire army alone. He stared at her, his mind struggling to process the incredible statement. A shocking revelation came from the goddess. He could fight an entire army alone. He questioned her meaning, and she explained that when he was reincarnated, they had to adapt his body to magic, which resulted in his aptitude for magic being much higher than normal. She confessed that they had accidentally overdid it a little, and his magic recovery, in particular, was of the spirit class. Still trying to grasp the implications, he admitted he knew nothing about spirit class magic. She clarified that it meant he was on the same level as creatures made purely of magic, which was truly amazing. Furthermore, his physical strength far exceeded what it should be. Magic was much easier for him to control, and running would barely tire him. He realized with a jolt that he might have already experienced some, or even all, of these enhanced abilities. She added that his magic recovery would increase as he increased his magic, alongside all his other stats, but he was still at a low level right now. As the full implications dawned on him, he understood why some things had fell off, realizing he had done quite a few things without considering his true situation. The goddess, looking remorseful, apologized for the oversight. As the protagonist processed the revelation of his immense power, the goddess, who had bestowed it upon him, looked away with a thoughtful, almost melancholic expression. Moments later, he found himself in a different setting, startled by the sudden appearance of a new figure, a woman he recognized as Victinia-sama. Early the next morning, he was greeted by Captain Cook, who, along with 2 armored guards, inquired about his well-being. He then questioned the protagonist about the beast folk, assuming from his expressions that the villagers had been reluctant to release them. The captain reminded him that other places would not yield so easily. He then shifted the conversation, inquiring about the beast folk situation in other villages, specifically their numbers and species, setting aside the complexities of big cities for the moment. The captain confirmed that their city maintained records on such matters and agreed that they would proceed to meet the relevant authorities after their current task. He then expressed his relief that the situation felt less tense, prompting the protagonist to ask what was troubling him. He explained his relief stemmed from the successful negotiations, then inquired if anything had transpired the previous night. The protagonist, feigning ignorance, asked for clarification. He then let out a hearty laugh, confessing that he had been prepared to resolve the situation with his fists if negotiations had failed. The captain and his men reacted with visible shock and dismay, urging him not to resort to such methods. He, recovering from the protagonist's alarming declaration, reminded him that the meeting was specifically arranged to prevent conflict, then instructed him to board the carriage as they were now heading to their city. He turned to Captain Cook, inquiring about the nature of their destination. The captain, with a confident smile, described it simply as a city of knights. Several hours later, they arrived at the imposing structure that served as the base for Greta's kingdom's coastal knights. He looked up, a hint of surprise on his face, as he processed the name of the place. As they rode through Paterium, the city of knights, Captain Cook explained that while it was indeed a knight base with proper buildings, it was not a fortress, but a city built for commerce and wealth. He observed the surroundings, noting the bustling activity. His gaze lingered on the less savory aspects of the city, particularly its sanitation. He mused that if this was the standard, he had no desire to make it his home, contrasting it with the concept of a fishing village, which seemed to offer a different, perhaps cleaner, way of life. He then considered that if the city truly operated in such a manner, it might present an opportunity to address the issue of the beast folk's release. Captain Cook, however, interrupted his thoughts, reminding him that they were headed to the assembly hall and would need to present identification at the front gate. He instructed Masaru to prepare his guild card, a necessary check for their meeting. Masaru's face registered a clear shock. A bead of sweat trickled down his face as the realization dawned on him. Captain Cook, noticing his distress, questioned if he truly meant he did not possess a guild card. Despite the setback, they proceeded to the Paterium Adventurer Guild. Inside, a guild staff member sternly admonished him, stating that everyone knew one was supposed to register at a guild and obtain a card upon turning 12. Captain Cook stood by, visibly exasperated by the situation. Victinia-sama, a guild staff member, then addressed him, thanking him for his patience. He felt a wave of relief, believing he had been spared further trouble due to Captain Cook's initial misunderstanding. Victinia-sama then instructed him to place his hand on a peculiar magic tool. He complied, placing his hand upon the glowing device. The guild staff explained that guild cards were an amazing technology, granted by the gods, capable of automatically creating the card. They also issued a stern warning that fraud and forgery were serious crimes, punishable by law. He held the divine magic tool, which would soon become his guild card. The chronicler of the world explained that while personal information could be hidden, his name, guild registration, and any criminal record would remain visible. Furthermore, this information could only be used for identification as long as the owner was alive, and no detailed data could be extracted from it. He expressed surprise at the security of his personal information. Victinia-sama then confirmed that the process was complete, extending the newly formed guild card to him and declaring it his own. Masaru, now holding the card, inquired if he simply needed to touch it and mentally command it to show everything. Victinia-sama and the blonde woman urged him to proceed, eager to see his information. With a confident declaration, he activated the card. Its surface glowed, displaying a comprehensive status screen. His name, Noriyuki Masaru, his job as an adventurer, and a surprisingly high level 66. His stats were also revealed: Vitality 218, Mind 99, Magic 267, Speed 101, Strength 120, Luck 42, and Stamina 80. His affiliation was listed as Adventurer, and he possessed 2 titles, Reincarnated Traveler, and a other title. Below these, a vast array of skills scrolled into view. Captain Cook, Masaru, and the blonde woman stared in stunned silence. Masaru, recovering slightly, noted that his level had increased. The blonde woman, still processing the information, remarked that the card resembled a status screen, then realized it was only natural, given it was a divine artifact made by a god. The sheer volume of skills displayed on the card overwhelmed them. Captain Cook, his face contorted in disbelief, bellowed, questioning Masaru's true nature. The blonde woman, equally bewildered, wondered aloud if such an abnormal number of skills was even possible. Masaru, flustered by their reactions, quickly tapped the card, attempting to hide some of the overwhelming information. He offered a sheepish smile, claiming it was merely a small mistake. Captain Cook and the blonde woman remained unconvinced. Captain Cook reiterated his shock at the multitude of skills, pointing out that most people possessed only 1 or 2. He then expressed utter astonishment at Masaru's 5 titles, something he had never witnessed before. Masaru, growing increasingly desperate, insisted that having so many skills was a positive thing and pleaded with them to overlook the anomaly. He vehemently denied being a spy or a criminal, trying to reassure them of his intentions. Victinia-sama, Captain Cook, and the blonde woman huddled together, discussing the precarious situation. Victinia-sama concluded that no one would believe their report if they revealed Masaru's true stats, and they themselves might be accused of lying and punished. She proposed an emergency meeting to strategize what to include in the official report and sternly warned Masaru to ensure his story was consistent and believable. He and his companions arrived at the Grand Poder-Urim Assembly Hall, where the blonde woman greeted them with a cheerful demeanor. She assured them that everything was in order for their meeting with the leader of the Knights, who also ruled the city. Masaru, however, felt a sudden, inexplicable dread as Captain Cook announced their entry. He stepped into the meeting room, his gaze sweeping over the assembled figures, including the formidable leader of the Knights seated at the head of the table. The leader, a man with a stern gaze and an imposing presence, introduced himself as Lancelot, the undisputed ruler of the city. Masaru sensed Lancelot's aura, which was entirely different from that of the other knights, far more potent and commanding. He realized then that this negotiation would be far more difficult than he had initially anticipated. Lancelot, having been informed of Masaru's purpose, wasted no time with pleasantries. He cut straight to the core of the matter, asking if Masaru had come to personally negotiate the release of the beast folk. He continued, observing that Masaru did not appear to have any intention of offering money or items in exchange. Lancelot clarified that the negotiation, therefore, hinged entirely on what Masaru was willing to offer for their release. Masaru internally acknowledged Lancelot's calm and logical approach, realizing that this negotiation would indeed be a tough one. Lancelot, for his part, expressed genuine curiosity about the offer Masaru would make. He understood that any attempt to deceive Lancelot would likely backfire spectacularly. In this critical moment, the best option was to lay his cards bare and confront him directly. Lancelot pressed him, stating this was the biggest deal the city had seen since its establishment, and asked what Masaru would offer. Masaru declared his offer: knowledge. Victinius immediately questioned the vagueness of such an offer, prompting Lancelot to ask Masaru for a clearer explanation. Masaru elaborated, stating that with his knowledge, he could reduce the death rate, improve the food situation, and increase the population, productivity, and overall quality of life in the city. He then provided a more concrete example, stating that horse carriages were the first thing he would like to improve. Victinius reacted with a surprised seriously. He began to elaborate on his plans for improving horse carriages, explaining that when he rode one, he noticed it shook considerably. He proposed a mechanism, specifically springs, to absorb shocks and vibrations, a feature none of the city's current carriages possessed. Masaru continued, asserting that his design would result in a carriage many times smoother, though not entirely devoid of movement. Furthermore, he expressed a desire to improve the horse's hooves, implying a more comprehensive approach to transportation. Lancelot listened, acknowledging that he understood the essence of Masaru's offer. He conceded that if this knowledge yielded results, it could bring about fantastic improvements, the kind the city would eventually need. However, Lancelot's expression hardened as he voiced his immediate distrust. He declared that he could not place his faith in something as intangible as knowledge, something he could neither see nor touch, without proof. Therefore, Lancelot laid out his condition. Masaru would be required to remain in the city until he could demonstrate clear, tangible results. He pointed out that only small towns or villages would accept such a convincing offer outright, without proof. Masaru, in turn, questioned if this meant he was being asked to join as a knight. Victinius then interjected, reminding Masaru that he had already declined Captain Cook's previous invitation to join the knights, expressing regret at the loss of his potential strength. Lancelot clarified his terms further, stating that the beast folk would remain in their custody until Masaru produced the promised results. He warned Masaru that if he failed to do so, he would either continue to stay there indefinitely until he could produce them, or face a meaningless death. Lancelot then revealed the full scope of his demand, asserting that Masaru would offer not just his knowledge, but his potential future as well. Masaru's expression shifted to one of surprise at the gravity of the condition. After a moment of consideration, Masaru agreed to the terms. Lancelot, a slight smirk playing on his lips, then specified that as soon as Masaru showed even a small improvement in two key areas, sanitation and horse carriages, he would hand over the beast folk. Lancelot then remarked that Masaru was looking at the situation incorrectly, stating he was not surprised by how favorable these conditions were. He mused that from his perspective, he was securing a great deal, as he could both eliminate the threat of beast folk rebellion and gain the benefit of Masaru's knowledge. Victinius, observing the exchange, then asked Masaru if he would like to discuss the details with the secretary. He observed Lancelot, who declared that they, too, resented the act of invading and pillaging under the guise of war. Masaru realized that the city's leader was not a bad person after all. As Masaru considered this, Lancelot asked if he had any interesting ideas. Masaru, in turn, inquired about the real problem, which Lancelot identified as the people who would oppose the release of the beast folk. Lancelot then stated his intention to gather the scattered beast folk. Masaru, with a mischievous grin, proposed a devilish idea, suggesting that since this was a city of knights, they should settle the matter with a duel. Lancelot found the idea intriguing, believing it would make for a great show. He further elaborated that the loser would have to accept the outcome without complaint, and there would be plenty of idiots who wouldn't know how to shut up and accept defeat. Masaru then clarified his proposal, a duel between himself and the strongest person in the city, with the winner deciding the fate of the beast folk. Victinius, overhearing the conversation, expressed shock and questioned if Masaru truly meant to challenge Lancelot himself. She warned that if his opponent was the strongest person in the city, Masaru would surely be defeated, and they would not be able to see his true strength if he only fought small fry like goblins. Lancelot, with a confident smirk, then challenged Masaru directly, asking if he was ready to spar. Captain Cook, holding a practice sword, challenged Masaru to a spar. Masaru's eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity, his expression twisting into a wide, eager grin at the prospect of battle, while Lancelot and other soldiers observed. Despite the potential for problems, Masaru readily accepted the challenge, his enthusiasm surprising Captain Cook. He instructed that the training grounds be made available. Captain Cook, taken aback by Masaru's eagerness, asked where they should begin. Masaru, however, simply told him to inform him once the date and time for the duel were finalized. Moments later, Masaru stood before Captain Cook, Lancelot, and several other soldiers, announcing his intention to deliver a lecture on hygiene. He continued, explaining the critical importance of maintaining good hygiene and outlining practices to improve sanitation standards. Masaru then declared his intention to gather every available person for this crucial lecture. Lancelot, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed to fetch his smartest subordinates to attend. Captain Cook, seemingly satisfied, stated he would leave the matter to Masaru and would be at the training grounds if needed. Masaru, however, then issued a stern warning. Anyone who missed the lecture, including Commander Lancelot, would receive a mandatory makeup session, emphasizing that even higher-ups must set a good example. Returning to his lecture, Masaru, holding a scroll, reiterated that the most significant challenge they faced was the pervasive lack of sanitary practices. He elaborated, explaining that unmanaged feces and urine served as breeding grounds for insects and pests, which in turn carried and rapidly spread diseases when consumed by rats and birds. He stressed the importance of thoroughly cooking meat, always boiling water before drinking, diligently cleaning homes, and regularly washing clothes. He continued his lecture, explaining concepts he considered basic, yet the soldiers, including Captain Cook, appeared to find the information complex, diligently taking notes. Captain Cook expressed his surprise, admitting he had not expected Masaru to be capable of delivering such a sudden and detailed discourse. Masaru, with a confident smile, elaborated on the profound impact of maintaining a clean environment. He asserted that proper hygiene could drastically reduce death rates across the entire city, from newborns to adults, and even prevent outbreaks of plagues. He offered to share all he knew, despite not being a medical expert. As Masaru spoke, Captain Cook pondered his true identity, questioning who Masaru really was. He noted that the plague had not yet reached the kingdom's capital, and due to its dangerous nature, few were willing to research it. Commander Lancelot then inquired if Captain Cook had any information, large or small, about the plague. Captain Cook affirmed that any such knowledge would be extremely valuable. Masaru, observing their discussion, offered his assistance, asking if there was anything he could help with. Captain Cook, however, initially declined, stating that since they were on the benefiting side, it was not appropriate to accept further aid. Captain Cook explained his stance, asserting that allowing oneself to be indebted to others simply wasn't very professional. Masaru found Captain Cook's principled refusal refreshing. He then reconsidered, stating that if that were the case, it would be bad manners to hold back. He then asked if it would be possible to lend him the smithing workshop from the following day onwards, as he had something he needed help with. Captain Cook readily agreed, stating he would make the arrangements for Masaru to start using it tomorrow. Masaru, delighted, mentioned he also needed to start on improvements for horse carriages and other things he wanted to try. Captain Cook then explained that all the good craftsmen had long since moved to the capital, and their coastal city had no good blacksmiths, which surprised Masaru. They arrived at the City of Knights, Paterium Smithing Workshop. It was a large, dusty space, filled with a mountain of unused materials piled up everywhere. Masaru looked around, clearly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of dormant resources. Overwhelmed by the task ahead, Masaru turned to Captain Cook, urgently declaring that he needed people anyone, to help. He surveyed the chaotic smithing workshop, his expression a mix of shock and indignation. This disarray was unacceptable. It could barely be called a workshop. He declared his intention to take a complete inventory of everything by the end of the day, demanding records of all materials, broken items, and any abnormalities. His companions, including Lancelot, looked on, surprised by his intensity. He continued, questioning why nothing was organized and why there was so much dust. Lancelot, taken aback, reminded him that they were still a military, and they had at least been doing the bare minimum to keep the place organized. His thoughts drifted to his past life, recalling the meticulous inventory management required in a home center with tens of thousands of products. Such sloppiness was unforgivable, as a single error in a catalog could lead to countless hours searching for items or irregularities. Returning to the present, he issued a direct order to Lancelot, instructing him to gather his men and get the workshop in order. Lancelot, though still somewhat bewildered, acknowledged the command. He then declared with fierce determination that he would demonstrate the true meaning of inventory management. True to his word, he began the arduous task, meticulously inspecting items and recording them on a clipboard. He instructed the guards and a local worker on how to properly categorize and store various tools and materials, such as hammers and wooden planks. As the day wore on, he continued his diligent work, overseeing the organization of countless items, even as night fell. His efforts transformed the cluttered space into an orderly one. Finally, with the task complete, a wide, satisfied smile spread across his face as he uttered a quiet exclamation of accomplishment. The next morning, the workshop was unrecognizable. Shelves now lined the walls, neatly stocked with materials, and the floor was clean. An official, observing the transformation, remarked that the place looked much better now. He, however, still had concerns. He questioned the official about the city's finances and the excessive amount of materials, admitting he had no idea what to do with fantasy materials like black steel and crimson ore, though he understood the uses of copper and tin. He listened as the official, despite the late hour, explained that the city was bound by a long-term contract to purchase these specific ores, a contract that still had 1 year remaining before its expiration. Masaru's expression tightened with frustration. Considering the abundance of unfamiliar materials, he mused that if he experimented, he could likely create some useful alloys. He suggested they should at least begin by processing the ore into ingots, prompting the official to inquire, "What are alloys?" He then proceeded to explain, using copper and tin as an example, how mixing them creates bronze, a metal stronger than pure copper, though not as strong as iron. He illustrated this by showing various items that could be crafted from such composite materials, including hooks, sickles, combs, razors, bells, and knives. As he continued, expressing his desire to attempt making stainless steel, which required iron and chromium, the official quickly interjected, overwhelmed by the technical details. He asked Masaru to slow down, admitting he found the explanation too complex, and Masaru realized he might have oversimplified his approach. He clarified that when a metal possesses undesirable properties, it can be mixed with other metals, following precise formulas and proportions, to form an alloy with new, useful characteristics. He used the example of iron and carbon combining to create steel, which is stronger than iron, offers a wider range of uses, and is harder, though also more brittle. The official, still processing the revelation of such advanced techniques, excused himself to organize the inventory documents. With the workshop finally cleaned and organized, Masaru decided it was time to experiment a little with his newly acquired smithing skill. He activated the skill, and a detailed description appeared before him. Smithing Level 2 granted him the ability to process and repair metals without tools, creating ingots or shapes simply by imagining them, even physically impossible ones, at the cost of magic. He realized these were indeed special skills bestowed by the skill tickets, and resolved to find a way to acquire more. With newfound understanding, he pointed decisively at 2 iron ingots, one of high quality and the other of normal quality, each weighing approximately 2 kilograms. He raised his arm, a fierce determination in his eyes, declaring that if he could master this skill, he could truly make anything he desired, just as its description promised. He decided to start by crafting something small. Several hours later, Masaru sat, examining a newly crafted knife. He carefully observed its form, noting the parts embedded within its handle. He stood before the forge, a thought forming in his mind. He wondered if he possessed the necessary skill to craft something himself, rather than relying on others. His expression tightened with determination as he considered the task. He decided he couldn't resist the urge to try, resolving to simply attempt it. With a focused gaze, he began the process, holding a piece of metal over the flames. "Let's see," he murmured. "How's this?" He continued to work the metal with powerful, precise strikes. His face set in a confident smile as sparks flew from the anvil. After shaping the metal, he moved to quench it, explaining that cooling it with water would increase its hardness and strength. This, he realized, was the product of his experience from farming school's practical lessons. Meanwhile, in the background, a worker observed his unusual methods. Moments later, Lancelot, the captain, arrived, his eyes wide with surprise as he saw Masaru holding a newly forged blade. He exclaimed that they had been searching for Masaru since noon, having run out of storage space, and he had intended to sharpen his own sword while he was there. Lancelot, astonished, questioned how long Masaru had been there, realizing that he truly could make weapons. Masaru, still holding the blade, admitted that he could, sort of, forge weapons, but believed he could create an even better blade than the one he currently held. Lancelot, however, was more concerned with the fact that Masaru was forging a blade at all. Lancelot then observed that the blade Masaru held looked like a simple piece of metal beaten into shape, and asked if Masaru would consider giving his own sword a few strikes. He explained that lately, his sword no longer cut as it used to, no matter how many times he sharpened it. Masaru, intrigued, thought he should do something about Lancelot's sword, while Lancelot expressed great expectations for what Masaru might achieve. As they continued their discussion, Lancelot's attention was drawn to some items on a nearby table, asking Masaru what they were. He also mentioned that there was one other thing he was curious about. Masaru, with a knowing smile, acknowledged Lancelot's point and promised to reveal what he had tomorrow, inviting him to check it out then. He added that he had something he wanted to discuss with Lancelot. He informed Lancelot and the official that he was ready to proceed to the next stage, instructing them that they could go wherever they pleased. Lancelot, observing Masaru's calm and confident expression, wondered if the young man was simply unfazed or possessed an incredibly strong will. The official, meanwhile, expressed his curiosity about the unfolding events. After their departure, he continued his work, now sitting amidst a growing collection of newly forged items, a weary sigh escaping his lips. He surveyed the numerous pots and kettles he had created, a slight exasperation in his thoughts as he realized he had likely produced far too many. Lancelot had warned him not to overdo his efforts, but Masaru merely smiled. The knight reflected that Masaru's intense gaze, when focused on his craft, mirrored his own expression when he wielded a sword. While he genuinely enjoyed bringing happiness to others and being useful, he admitted to himself that, at his core, his true joy came simply from the act of creating things. He knew that tomorrow he would have to transport these newly forged items into town and instruct the populace on their proper use. He also acknowledged the ongoing need for his sanctioned lectures. For now, however, he desired to continue creating for a little longer, as the night had yet to end for this dedicated metalsmith. The following morning, a young woman called out to Masaru, urging him to wake. He stirred, confused, asking who she was. She seemed surprised by his question. The world braced for an approaching battle, a clash involving a goddess, and a mysterious figure whose identity remained unclear. Moments later, the young woman, now identified as a messenger, explained that with the knights occupied with their studies, she was running errands for them. She then delivered a message to Masaru. His duel with Lancelot was set for 3 days hence, at the training area. She continued, reminding him that Narumi Masaru was to report to the training area that morning, as attendance was compulsory. He groaned, realizing he had almost forgotten about the message. The messenger then remarked that Masaru was a strange one himself, wondering what he had done to pique the interest of that old geezer, Lancelot. She explained that Lancelot was a battle maniac who wouldn't listen to anyone and had simply decided on the duel himself. Masaru looked distressed by this revelation. He stretched, expressing his discomfort with the situation, while she simply stated that it sucked to be him. She added that a medical team would be on standby on the day of the duel, advising him to be careful not to overdo it. Masaru promised to do his best, but also to not hurt Lancelot too badly. The messenger then asked if he truly believed he would lose, or if he was just being sarcastic. He responded with a confident grin, declaring that he was going to put on a little demonstration. Meanwhile, Lancelot stood at the training area, awaiting Masaru's arrival, wondering where he was. Soon after, Masaru arrived, greeting Lancelot and announcing that the pipes were set. A worker confirmed that the machine parts were indeed for pumping water, and Masaru affirmed they should start right away. Another guard pointed out that Masaru was over by the well, installing some contraption. Masaru then called out to the gathered crowd, urging everyone to witness his demonstration of a new tool that would help with drawing water. He emphasized its extreme ease of use and asked for someone to assist him. He explained to the blonde woman that the new water-drawing tool was simple enough for anyone, regardless of gender or age, to operate. She, in turn, eagerly asked if there was anything she could do to assist. Following his instructions, she carefully poured the initial priming water into the pump's hole, a crucial step to remove air and create a vacuum within the pipe. Then, she began to move the lever up and down repeatedly, and with a satisfying gurgle, the mechanism began to work. Moments later, a torrent of water erupted from the pump, filling the basin below and astonishing the gathered crowd, including the officials and guards. He proudly declared that this remarkable tool was called a pump and announced his intention to install them throughout the city, urging everyone to make good use of them. His attention then shifted to the horse carriages, which he observed with Captain Cook. He knew he had ridden in one before, but upon closer inspection, he realized these were truly primitive designs. He knelt to examine the underside, noting the simple construction where metal axles ran directly across, with the carriage body mounted directly on top of them. Rising, he began to explain his plan to Captain Cook. He would attach a separate frame to the wheels and suspend the passenger portion from it, incorporating springs at both the front and back to absorb shocks. He admitted he only knew a little about the underlying principles of such a mechanism and had yet to actually test how effectively it would mitigate shaking. Nevertheless, he declared that today they would begin building the foundation for this improvement. With his design sketched, he and Captain Cook, along with other workers and guards, immediately set about constructing the improved carriage. They worked diligently, assembling the new components. Soon, the prototype was complete. Captain Cook, eager to try it, suggested they get some horses and take a nice, slow ride. Masaru, however, seemed to hesitate, perhaps anticipating the ride's quality. Captain Cook then took the prototype for a test ride, observing its movement. He reported that while it still shook, it felt considerably more comfortable than riding directly on the axles. He realized this was the mechanism Masaru had spoken of, designed to reduce the jarring impact. Masaru meticulously detailed the mechanics of carriage suspension, illustrating the difference between a rigid axle, where both wheels are connected and move together, and an independent suspension system, which allows each wheel to move separately. He noted that the carriages currently used in the city lacked any form of suspension, and he intended to add parts to absorb impacts. He also expressed a desire to experiment with various shock absorbers, recalling the many different models available. He continued to present various other suspension types, explaining their intricacies. His immediate focus, he declared, was on perfecting the suspension, though he ultimately wished to construct a carriage large enough to transport 9 or 10 people. Captain Cook, observing the designs, inquired if it would be possible to enlarge the passenger area. Masaru then explained that by incrementally improving and building upon current technologies, they would surely achieve larger breakthroughs in the future. Captain Cook, listening intently, exclaimed that expedition campaigns would undoubtedly become far more enjoyable with such advancements. However, he quickly admonished the others to settle down, promising they would all get a chance to ride the improved carriage next time. Commander Lancelot and Victinius, both eager, clamored for their turn, with Lancelot specifically demanding to go next. Masaru then turned to Lancelot, gesturing towards a more private area, indicating he wished to discuss something with him. Lancelot appeared surprised by the sudden invitation. Lancelot acknowledged the convenience of the things Masaru had shown them, admitting that their lives would noticeably improve. Masaru, in turn, explained that he needed to teach the local craftsmen how to make repairs when needed, and that he had also created 2 or 3 other tools. Lancelot then brought up the discussion Masaru had mentioned yesterday, confirming he was ready to proceed. Masaru reminded him that he valued the importance of having balanced deals, a concept Lancelot had quickly grasped during their previous meeting. Lancelot, with a stern expression, stated his belief that their side's current offers were not yet sufficient, and directly asked Masaru what he truly desired. Masaru then laid out his demands, an agreement to halt all invasions between beast folk and humans, and the possession of all Lancelot's excess inventory of ore. He confirmed that was all he asked. Lancelot, his eyes wide with surprise, questioned if those were truly the only terms. Having heard Masaru's terms, Lancelot finally agreed to the proposed deal, stating his acceptance. He then questioned the specifics of the ore, wondering if it was truly acceptable for Masaru to simply take it, provided it did not impede the lives of the local populace. Masaru, in turn, expressed his gratitude, emphasizing that with this agreement, the beast folk would finally live in peace after their release, and that any deal involving technology must benefit both parties. Lancelot, however, cautioned him, acknowledging his own lack of power to oppose a country, and advised Masaru to be careful. As Masaru turned to leave, Lancelot glanced back, a subtle expression of concern or contemplation crossing his face. Moments later, Masaru offered a sincere thank you. His smile met with a knowing, almost proud, grin from Lancelot. Suddenly, Lancelot burst into laughter, challenging Masaru to give his best in a duel set for 3 days hence. Masaru groaned in exasperation, internally labeling Lancelot a battle maniac. Masaru reflected on the verbal agreement, trusting Lancelot to uphold his promise, and felt a sense of accomplishment that the invasions from humans should finally cease. Feeling utterly drained, he decided he was done for the day and yearned for bed. However, his hopes for rest were immediately dashed as Victinius and others swarmed him, urgently demanding his attention for matters of hygiene and other pressing issues, much to his dismay. Overwhelmed by the relentless demands, Masaru collapsed, his face contorted in despair as he repeatedly declared his inability to cope. He lay there, utterly exhausted, lamenting the immense mental and physical toll of teaching and explaining complex technology to people who possessed no prior knowledge. He then thought of the various craftsmen who had taught him the intricacies of his trade back in his home center, grateful that he was still alive and had managed to obtain his license, understanding the pain they must have endured. Standing by a window, Masaru gazed out, reflecting on how those people were no longer under the same sky as him. He felt a profound desire to impart a message to them, a proxy of his severe longing, before dismissing the thought as overly dramatic. He found himself on a rooftop, speaking with Victinius, who sat beside him. He inquired if the poem she had mentioned earlier was from his hometown, noting that it spoke of being permanently separated from a loved one and giving up on ever meeting them again. He confirmed it was indeed a poem from the Hyakunin issue, admitting he had spoken it on a whim, even though he couldn't recall any of the other poems. Victinius, her expression thoughtful, then asked him about the person he had liked, the one the poem seemed to evoke. He appeared flustered by the question. He began to recount his past, describing the woman as cute with a small frame, someone he fell in love with at first sight when she joined his workplace. He confessed his feelings a few months later, though he admitted he didn't express himself well. Years passed, and she eventually joined another family, leading him to offer congratulations on her marriage, a memory that still pained him. He revealed her name was May, and found it surprising that he had ended up sharing the entire story. He then noted a curious coincidence. There was a child named May in the rabbit village. Victinius, her gaze downcast, offered a quiet apology to him. He dismissed her apology, stating that after all the lies she had played around with, it was a little late for such sentiments. He then realized that this was what she had meant the last time they parted. He then expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that he had been saved by these feelings and that meeting the rabbit people, thanks to her, now motivated him to do his best. He admitted he wanted to thank her, Victinius-sama, a little, for bringing him to this world. Under the soft glow of the full moon, Victinius smiled gently, her hand resting near her face. She then asked him what was wrong, as he suddenly called her a useless goddess. He quickly corrected himself, stating that despite her being a goddess, he was the one who brought her to this world and asked for her forgiveness. He listened as the goddess, a gentle smile gracing her lips, confirmed that all was well between them. She then expressed her desire to linger on the rooftop a while longer, savoring the cool night breeze. He acknowledged her wish, asking if that was truly her intention. Feeling a renewed surge of energy, he declared his intention to head to the smithing workshop, eager to make productive use of his invigorated state. As he began to depart, casting a glance back, she remained on the rooftop under the luminous full moon, remarking on its exquisite beauty that night. In the 15 days following the incident with Victinius, Masaru found no time for rest. He diligently absorbed knowledge from passing townsfolk, learning about the local ways and customs. Whenever he had a spare moment, he dedicated it to preparing for the inevitable battles ahead, honing his skills and understanding of this new world. Then, the day of the duel with Lancelot finally arrived. He stood before the grand arena, a massive structure bustling with people, its sheer scale a testament to the importance of the impending confrontation. As he entered the waiting room, he found Captain Cook already there, stretching. Cook, impressed that Masaru hadn't fled, remarked on the duel becoming a grand spectacle, almost a festival. Masaru, in turn, inquired about Lancelot. Cook, however, grew agitated, demanding to know the whereabouts of his sword, which Masaru had promised to improve. Masaru, with a calm demeanor, stated that he had another, more important request, explaining that he only drew his own sword for his subordinates. To Cook's utter shock, Masaru then casually revealed that he had broken the sword Cook had given him, using it merely for reference. He dismissed Cook's incredulity, asserting that no fool would ever show their opponent their true weapon before a duel. Cook, though clearly annoyed, conceded the point. Masaru then drew a short sword, explaining that while it was made of rougher material than the one Cook had provided, its workmanship was comparable. Cook, eyeing the smaller blade, questioned if that was truly the weapon he intended to use for the duel. He stood poised, the short sword held firmly in his grip, a confident smirk playing on his lips. With a knowing smile, Masaru declared he would do his best to hold back, lest Cook suffer injury after his inevitable defeat. Cook, matching his grin, found Masaru's confidence adorable and eagerly anticipated his victory sake that night. Masaru mused that it had been a long time since he had encountered an opponent so unreserved in their words. Cook, leaning back, retorted that the last person who underestimated him when he was a new recruit had certainly regretted it afterwards. Cook then pressed him, asking about his experience with losing against humans. Masaru, with unwavering certainty, simply replied, none. He listened as Lancelot, with a confident smirk, asked if he had any strategy, adding that he didn't seem to think much of it. Captain Cook then remarked that there weren't many people who could take down a goblin rider alone, implying Masaru's skill. Masaru, however, seemed flustered, realizing that all his preparations might turn out to be for nothing. Lancelot then challenged him, urging him to fight with all his might. Masaru acknowledged the challenge, understanding that this was also a form of gratitude from Lancelot. As the tension built, Masaru looked up towards the stands, his gaze drawn to a particular figure. There, the blonde woman offered a cheerful, reassuring gesture, making a peace sign with her fingers. Moments later, Masaru, Lancelot, and Captain Cook stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by the expectant crowd. Lancelot raised his arms, his voice booming across the stadium as he declared the duel between adventurer Masaru and coastal knight commander Lancelot was officially started. From the stands, Victinius, the blonde woman, Captain Cook, and an official watched with expressions of concern, their faces etched with worry over the impending match. With that, Lancelot turned to Masaru, urging them both to strive for a fair and honorable duel, free from any untoward incidents. He then clarified the rules. The duel would end when either party was unable to continue fighting or surrendered. As Lancelot and Masaru faced each other, their eyes locked in fierce determination, the blonde woman wondered aloud what Masaru was thinking, while Victinius mused that Lancelot didn't look like a fighter when she first saw him. Then, the command rang out. Begin. The two warriors immediately clashed, their blades meeting with a sharp ring. The determining factor, it seemed, would be whether Lancelot could truly understand Masaru's capabilities, for this might turn out to be a short battle. He found himself surprised. At first glance, the duel seemed evenly matched, but the reality of Lancelot's power was quickly becoming apparent. Lancelot, however, was equally astonished, realizing he had encountered someone capable of rivaling him in a pure test of strength. He mockingly suggested ending the fight and claiming his victory, but Masaru's defiant stance made it clear he would not yield. Lancelot, with a wide, unsettling grin, challenged him to reveal his true capabilities. The duel intensified, Lancelot pressing his advantage with relentless strikes. He delivered a powerful kick that sent Masaru reeling, forcing him to block desperately as Lancelot continued his assault, his blade a blur. Masaru barely managed to parry a devastating overhead strike, the force of the blow shattering the ground beneath him. He questioned Lancelot's intent, wondering if his opponent was truly trying to kill him. Lancelot paused, observing Masaru's stance. He acknowledged Masaru's inherent strength and obvious experience with a sword, recognizing him as a formidable opponent. Yet, despite his raw talent, Lancelot declared Masaru's technique terrible. Their blades remained locked, Masaru struggling against Lancelot's superior form. He cursed inwardly, realizing his lack of true battle experience was hindering him, preventing him from moving as freely as he desired. Lancelot continued his relentless assault, forcing Masaru to react defensively. Masaru retreated, creating some distance from Lancelot. He acknowledged the truth in Lancelot's assessment, knowing he had much to learn. He recalled Victinius's words about fighting a war by himself, a feat that seemed impossible in his current state. However, he had confirmed what he needed for his strategy. With renewed resolve, he declared he would try out his ultimate move, while Lancelot watched, ready for whatever came next. As Masaru prepared, he resolved to put all the knowledge he had gained from his previous life, the countless hours spent working in a home center, and the efforts of the craftsmen who taught him to create, into this next move. Lancelot, for his part, anticipated Masaru's next action, eager to witness the culmination of his opponent's efforts. He extended his hand, and from what he called an item box, several large logs materialized and fell around Lancelot. Lancelot, caught off guard, questioned what Masaru was doing, realizing with a jolt that Masaru was a skill user, a fact never mentioned in his status report. Lancelot demanded to know Masaru's intentions with the scattered materials, realizing he had been lured into a trap. Masaru moved swiftly among the logs, and Lancelot watched in disbelief as Masaru activated a chain skill use, combining woodworking, smithing, and construction to rapidly assemble the materials. In mere moments, the scattered logs and barrels transformed into a rudimentary but imposing structure surrounding Lancelot. Lancelot observed the newly formed structures, recognizing them as siege weapons. Masaru, with a confident smirk, explained that his current magic skill level allowed him to create such things, limited to what he could envision, like battering rams. Lancelot understood this was Masaru's strategy, contemplating a directional attack to counter it. He moved with practiced agility, navigating the newly erected obstacles, his blade ready. Lancelot's expression hardened as he questioned if Masaru was underestimating him, declaring his disappointment. Meanwhile, the blonde woman, Victinius, watched the unfolding duel with a subtle, knowing smile. Lancelot noted Masaru maintaining his distance, wondering if he intended to scatter more materials. He resolved to close the gap the moment Masaru attempted to use another skill. Victinius continued to watch, her eyes wide with anticipation. Suddenly, Lancelot's eyes widened in surprise, and Victinius, sensing a shift, urgently called out his name. Masaru had constructed a massive bow and arrow, aiming it directly at Lancelot. Lancelot stared in disbelief at the giant weapon. Masaru declared that from his current position, he only needed one step to unleash his attack. A moment later, a powerful projectile struck Lancelot. The impact sent Lancelot reeling backward, his face contorted in a grimace of pain and shock as the massive projectile slammed into him. He gritted his teeth, his face contorted in a grimace of pain and exertion as the impact of the giant arrow struck him with immense force. From the stands, the official and the blonde woman watched, their expressions frozen in disbelief and shock at the unexpected turn of events. Despite the powerful blow, he managed to remain upright, though he was forced to one knee, his gaze still fixed on his opponent with a mixture of pain and determination. As he struggled to recover, his opponent stood over him, sword raised, ready to continue the assault in the arena filled with onlookers. Moments later, the duel resumed with renewed ferocity. He parried a powerful overhead strike from Masaru, their blades clashing loudly. He felt the strain, sweat beading on his brow. He internally acknowledged that after training with Masaru, the only thing he had left was his arm. He considered trying to force the fight back into a close-ranged engagement, like the beginning of the duel, but a chilling realization dawned on him. It might not be enough. His eyes widened in shock as a terrible crack echoed through the arena. His own sword, the symbol of his strength and skill, began to shatter under the relentless pressure. The sound of the breaking blade sent a wave of surprise through the onlookers, including the official, the blonde woman, and Victinius, who watched with wide eyes. Masaru, too, seemed momentarily taken aback by the sudden turn. With his weapon broken, the duel was decisively over. He sat defeated on the ground, his shattered sword beside him, as Masaru stood victorious. An official's voice boomed across the arena, declaring, "Match over. The winner is Masaru." Masaru stood confidently in the arena, a slight smile playing on his lips, as Captain Cook, looking surprised, realized the true nature of their duel. Cook admitted he understood Masaru's intent to break his sword, but Masaru countered, questioning if Cook had truly believed his own blade was unbreakable. He then confessed that at first, he had indeed thought Cook's blade would break, but a certain guarantee had changed his perspective. Masaru continued, explaining that the sword Cook had lent him was crafted from a different material than his current weapon, making his initial gamble a calculated risk. He revealed he had intentionally cut the borrowed sword beforehand as a test. Therefore, the battering rams and the giant bow were not merely obstacles, but tools to create a strategy that would allow him to directly slice Cook's blade. He offered a quick apology for his deception. Cook listened intently as Masaru further clarified that the giant bow was a siege weapon, a ballista, and that merely stopping Cook's movement was enough to position himself to sever the blade. He expressed genuine surprise that Cook had chosen to cut the incoming arrow rather than evade it. Masaru then declared that the true lesson of their battle was not about sword skill, but about the quality of the weapons themselves. He added that this was precisely why he could not have given Cook something before their duel. With a flourish, he presented a massive, intricately designed sword to Captain Cook, who gazed at the imposing weapon with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Masaru offered the formidable blade to Cook, explaining it was a token of appreciation for engaging in a duel with someone who had appeared from nowhere. He confidently stated that with such a weapon, he doubted anyone could ever defeat Cook. The captain accepted the sword, his expression shifting from awe to a deep appreciation. Cook, now holding the magnificent sword, let out a hearty laugh, agreeing that receiving such a weapon before their duel would indeed have been a terrible idea. He swung the blade, testing its weight and balance, a wide grin on his face as Masaru watched him. Masaru, holding his own sword, looked thoughtful for a moment before turning to Cook. He remarked that he might have said it before, but he was a berserker, one who loved to fight. Cook met his gaze, his expression serious and contemplative. While Masaru stood victorious, Captain Cook's thoughts turned inward, reflecting on the profound joy he found in fighting, the experience and growth it brought him on the battlefield, whether with swords or otherwise. He simply loved to fight. He recalled a time when there was no one who could come close to him, nobody who could truly challenge him. Yet, he knew that one day, comrades who shared his passion would naturally gather around him, allowing him to keep swinging his sword. Standing opposite Masaru in the arena, he mused aloud about the peculiar nature of war, how it felt like a funny story even though it couldn't be fought by a single person. He admitted that the stronger he grew, the fewer battles there were for him to fight, leading him to simply polish his sword every day. Cook listened intently as Masaru explained that his previous actions, before he knew it was practically impossible to carry out an organization by himself, were the result of invading others and setting up a fight. He called out to Lancelot. With a wide grin, Cook declared that today had been truly interesting, and for the first time in a long while, he had fun. He then playfully warned Masaru not to utter phrases like, "No one who can beat me," when speaking of the sword. Masaru, in turn, confessed he would rather fight, suggesting that if it meant he could someday go all out, then perhaps. Cook agreed, proposing they fight again sometime when Masaru had grown stronger. Below, Commander Lancelot, on behalf of Paterium, formally recognized Masaru as the winner of the duel. Masaru then vowed to fulfill the promise he had made to Lancelot. Moments later, the blonde woman, Victinius, stood before the cheering crowd, declaring that immediately after this, all enslaved beastfolk were to be released and granted freedom. Masaru and Cook stood beside her, raising their arms in solidarity as the crowd erupted in celebration. That night, in a tavern in the City of Knights, the official and the worker discussed the day's events. The official expressed surprise that Masaru could use production skills like bolt training to survive a battle. The worker, Eldam, joked that it was rare for Cook to make such a remark, adding that only someone with as many skills as Masaru could pull that off. Meanwhile, Masaru himself could be seen ascending a staircase in the background. The official, still intrigued, pressed further, asking if Masaru truly possessed so many skills. Cook, seated with them, seemed to be listening intently, his expression unreadable as the worker continued to speak. Suddenly, a voice from behind them startled the group. Commander Lancelot had entered the tavern, his presence commanding immediate attention from Masaru, Cook, the official, and the worker. He glared at the two men, Eldam and the official, who flinched under his gaze. "Calm down, you idiots," he commanded, as they stammered an admission that a mistake had been made. He then leaned in, demanding they reveal everything they were hiding about Masaru, stating it was an order. Eldam and the official exchanged worried glances, discussing the significant difference between the Masaru described in reports and the one Lancelot had personally fought. Lancelot, observing their distress, reassured them he meant no harm, explaining he was merely curious about the matter, specifically inquiring about the two individuals who had brought Masaru to the city. Sitting at a table, he reviewed a document, noting Masaru's reported level was consistent, yet he possessed around 20 skills and held a title. This, he mused, represented an unbelievably large and abnormal deviation from the norm. He continued to analyze the report, finding it difficult to believe Masaru was only level 16. He asserted that he could accept a level between 60 and 70, which was still far below his own level of 62. He concluded that not even the knights would possess someone with such an unusual profile, and decided to drop the subject. He then reflected on his connection with Masaru, acknowledging it was coming to an end for now, though he had managed to secure a promise for a second duel, which he considered a pity. Turning to Eldam and the official, he asked if they wished to keep an eye on Masaru, using the pretense of cooperation. The two men looked startled by his proposition. Meanwhile, a mysterious woman with long, wavy hair and a knowing smile pondered a strategic move. She wondered if there wasn't someone who had been assigned the role of a messenger and just happened to be free at that very moment, mentioning Aji-sama. A few days later, Masaru stood before the Grand Assembly Hall, conversing with Lancelot, Eldam, and the official. He confirmed his readiness to depart, acknowledging the improvements that had begun to show results. He also assured them he would contact them if the village ever required assistance again. Lancelot, now sporting a noticeable bruise on his cheek, stood with his arms crossed, his expression stern. He looked at Masaru, who was just out of view, and inquired about the origin of the bruises. Eldam and the official watched with concern. Masaru, looking away, admitted he had gotten into a fight, but quickly added that he wasn't conceding his opponent's strength. Eldam, surprised, wondered aloud who could possibly inflict such bruises upon Lancelot in a fight. Lancelot, clearly annoyed, clarified that he would never raise his hand against a woman of marriageable age. Masaru's eyes widened in shock as he realized Lancelot was referring to Aji-sama. He stood beside Captain Cook as the large man introduced his niece, Adelina, a 19-year-old tomboy. Adelina, with a confident smirk, introduced herself and declared her intention to be useful in her new role from that day forward. The mention of Aji-sama once again caught him by surprise, prompting him to question if this was a recurring topic he had somehow missed. Captain Cook, looking stressed, seemed to be on the verge of explaining. Captain Cook then elaborated, revealing that Adelina had expressed a desire to expand her horizons for some time. However, he voiced his concern, stating that a lady embarking on a journey alone was simply inviting danger, implying that Masaru was pushing her into this situation. Adelina, however, dismissed his worries with a wave of her hand, confidently stating that she could sleep anywhere. Despite her assurance, Masaru still harbored reservations about bringing a city-raised girl to a rural village, believing it to be an unsuitable environment. As he considered the implications, Adelina turned her gaze towards him, a thoughtful smile gracing her lips as she mused that Masaru seemed like an interesting person. He let out a hearty laugh, remarking that Adelina truly possessed Lancelot's stubborn blood. He predicted that she would undoubtedly accompany them, regardless of any objections he might raise. He then warned her that if she intended to tag along, she might not return for a few years, urging her to be prepared for such a commitment. Adelina, undeterred, responded with an enthusiastic cheer. He further clarified his long-term vision, explaining that he planned to develop the village into a thriving city where the beast folk could live safely. He believed a few years was a reasonable time frame for such an endeavor, and that she could still visit home periodically. Captain Cook, however, interjected with a stern warning to Adelina, telling her not to lay a single finger on Aji-sama, threatening to sever all ties if she disobeyed. Masaru watched, surprised by the intensity of the warning. With their departure imminent, Masaru, Adelina, and Captain Cook prepared to leave. Masaru bid farewell to Lancelot, Eldam, and the official, promising to meet again and expressing gratitude for their hospitality, while also playfully suggesting he would return before they got into too much trouble. He, Adelina, and Captain Cook continued their journey, traversing diverse landscapes from a serene beach to a bustling town. He reflected that it had taken longer than expected to resolve the various problems and forge alliances along the way. Upon their arrival at the Beastfolk village, he announced his return with a cheerful wave. The rabbit folk, including a blonde woman and a dark-haired man, greeted them, some with cautious curiosity, others with open arms. He quickly began to explain the situation to the gathered rabbit folk, gesturing with an open hand as Adelina and Captain Cook stood by, observing the interaction. As the discussion continued, the blonde rabbit folk woman looked towards a tent, contemplating the many things that still needed to be planned and discussed for their future. In the background, Masaru, Adelina, Captain Cook, and other rabbit folk were engaged in conversation. He and Adelina watched the rabbit folk, a sense of purpose and determination evident in his expression. The blonde rabbit folk woman, overwhelmed with emotion, clung to him, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded for him to stay, if only for today. He gently held her, a soft, understanding smile gracing his lips. Meanwhile, in a different setting, the goddess Victinius smiled serenely, holding a cup and plate, expressing her desire to enjoy the moment to its fullest. In the background, Masaru continued to comfort the crying rabbit folk woman, while the goddess and an attendant sat at a table, seemingly partaking in a celebration. He embraced the rabbit folk woman, holding her close as a system notification appeared, indicating a world development bonus received and a new message awaiting him. The chapter concluded with this tender moment. Masaru had returned to the village, and his companions were surprised by the extent of his accomplishments. One of the rabbit-eared girls remarked that she thought he was only going to gather resources, but he had done so much more. Another companion, a small blonde girl, mused that her muscle-brained uncle could learn a thing or two from him. Around a crackling campfire, the group discussed their next steps. The rabbit-eared woman stated that she now understood Polterium's intentions, suggesting that if they were to take a different stance, they would put away their resentment and welcome their help, cooperating with them instead. However, the rabbit-eared woman still harbored some worries. She explained that she had already spoken directly to their commander and secured a treaty of peace, so they had no need to worry about that particular issue. Her concern, however, was especially regarding the technology Masaru had taught them, fearing they might develop faster and start to wage war again. She concluded that this was what they needed to focus on now. Despite the lingering concerns, Masaru, holding a small book, declared his grand vision. He announced that they needed to expand the village and create a city specifically for beastfolk, urging everyone to let's build. Moments later, Masaru appeared utterly exhausted, collapsing onto the ground. A tall blonde woman, observing his state, questioned if he was the one who had been talking about gathering resources, noting his apparent overwork. He admitted it might be because he overworks a lot and tends to get restless in his sleep. As he rested, a mysterious message appeared before him, prompting him to wonder who could have sent it. The message, a formal letter, introduced itself as coming from Victinia's younger sister, the goddess of magic Erisphera. It stated that reports of civilizational advancement had reached the gods of Alstetia, and as a reward, Masaru-sama would have his skills raised. The letter concluded with a sincere hope that Masaru would continue to live peacefully with their beloved children, and an offer to speak again should the opportunity arise. As he processed the message, Masaru realized he had received a world development bonus. He mused that this world did not just have a single god, implying a pantheon existed. He then smiled, thinking that a goddess with some common sense had finally shown up, especially since Victinius was like that. His companions, the rabbit-eared girl and the blonde girl, called out to him, but he was engrossed in his status screen. He saw that many of his skills, including swordsmanship, martial arts, healing magic, appraisal, farming, dismantling, mining, cutting, smithing, stonemasonry, woodworking, leathercraft, compounding, engineering, building inspection, art, singing, translation, and arithmetic had all increased by 1 level. He felt a surge of motivation, realizing that if he could get skills to level up like this, he would have no problem getting going. He then declared he needed to get moving. With renewed vigor, Masaru stood among a gathering of beast folk, including his companions and the blonde woman, ready to begin the expansion of their village. He stood before the gathered beast folk, offering an apology for the wait. He explained that he had called them together to discuss the future of their village, announcing the successful liberation of many beast folk who had been enslaved by humans. However, he warned them that a significant problem lay ahead. He elaborated on the challenge. The freed beast folk numbered around 200, which would triple the village's current population. To accommodate them, they would need to drastically improve their food supply, establish more robust defensive walls, and construct temporary shelters. With a sweeping gesture, he then proposed a bold solution: to build an entirely new city in a separate location. The crowd reacted with a mixture of surprise and murmurs, their faces reflecting the enormity of his suggestion. A male beast folk with rabbit ears voiced his skepticism, questioning if building a city was truly feasible and what kind of city Masaru envisioned. Masaru quickly reassured him, stating that he had already discussed the matter with the chief and identified a suitable area nearby, promising to do his utmost to support them all. He then offered a warm smile, declaring his intention to build a safe, inclusive, and joyful city specifically for beast folk. Below him, the crowd's expressions shifted from doubt to hope and excitement, many smiling in anticipation. The beast folk began to discuss among themselves, their initial apprehension giving way to a collective decision. They acknowledged Masaru as a trustworthy human and agreed to give his ambitious proposal a chance. As the discussion settled, a female beast folk with rabbit ears inquired if there was anything else he wished to convey. He responded that he felt it would be insincere not to properly talk about himself, as he hadn't truly trusted them enough to do so until today, and wished to reveal more now. The beast folk reflected that they had never truly asked about Masaru's past, only knowing he was found lost by the roadside, assuming he had his own problems. Masaru then began to reveal the truth about himself, stating his full name. He confessed that he, Narumi-ai Masaru, was brought to this world by the gods, from another world entirely. The beast folk reacted with profound shock and disbelief, their faces contorted in surprise. A heavy silence descended upon the crowd. Masaru observed their stunned faces, thinking to himself that he had expected nobody would believe such an extraordinary story. He found himself immediately surrounded, bombarded with questions. The beast folk clamored to know which god brought him, what they looked like, if his knowledge came from a different continent, or if it was from another world entirely. He felt as though he had been subtly insulted. Blonde woman G, however, simply observed, acknowledging the situation with a quiet, "I see." He tried to explain that the existence of gods was a given in his world, and that if it was their work, it would explain many things. Rabbit Man F, however, interjected, pointing out that Masaru had said it was the gods who brought him, and questioned why he was only now trying to earn their trust. Blonde woman G added that it was indeed a bit late for such an attempt. But Rabbit Man F quickly softened his tone, declaring that anyone who protected them, lived with them as a comrade, and toiled alongside them was practically family. He asserted that no one among them would be suspicious of such a person. Masaru looked on, touched by their acceptance, while Rabbit Girl A and Blonde Woman G smiled warmly. Despite the reassurance, the younger beast folk, including Rabbit Girl A and Blonde Girl B, continued to press him for more specific details. They wanted to know about the technology from his world, what humans were like where he came from, and more about the gods. Overwhelmed by their persistent curiosity, he finally conceded, promising to discuss more about himself at dinner that night. He also offered to make a bronze statue of the gods to show them next time, hoping to appease their questions. With the immediate questions temporarily settled, he shifted his focus to the pressing tasks at hand. He instructed the collection team to speak with him later about the wood, and urged everyone to follow the chief's instructions to set up the temporary tents first. More importantly, he emphasized they needed to begin the village expansion plans. As he gave out instructions, Blonde Woman G and Rabbit Girl A interrupted, asking about their own roles. He paused, considering them, and acknowledged that he had something very important in mind for the two of them. He then revealed their specific task. They were going to help him make slaked lime. Both Blonde Woman G and Rabbit Girl A looked at him with puzzled expressions, simultaneously asking what slaked lime was. He explained that while it wasn't particularly difficult, it was somewhat tedious. He further elaborated that they would be using it as a secret weapon when building their city, and that was why he was entrusting the task to his two most trusted individuals. Blonde Woman G found the idea interesting, while Rabbit Girl A seemed eager to begin. He began to instruct his companions on the construction of a specialized furnace, explaining that it could produce slaked lime. He detailed the initial steps. First, placing seashells into the pot, then igniting wood or fuel beneath it to start the fire. He stressed the importance of the next part of the process. He then pointed to a wooden box positioned next to the furnace, identifying it as a bellows. He demonstrated how pushing and pulling its handle would continuously blow air out of a hole, feeding the burning fire with fresh air. This mechanism, he elaborated, would channel air directly into the furnace through a tube, allowing them to achieve temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees. The Rabbit Girl, however, found the prospect of such extreme heat troubling, wondering what would come next. The revelation of such high temperatures left Masaru, Adelina, and the Rabbit Girl in awe. Adelina, pondering the implications, questioned just how hot 1,000 degrees truly was. He clarified the scale of the heat, explaining that water boiled at around 100 degrees, while iron glowed red and became malleable at approximately 1000 degrees. He further noted that iron typically melted at temperatures between 1200 and 1500 degrees, depending on its type. Adelina, impressed by the explanation, posed another astute question, asking how they would accurately measure such extreme temperatures. He admitted he did not know the exact method for measurement, but quickly shifted the focus. He emphasized that while knowledge and theoretical understanding were valuable, proper usage and safety were even more critical. Adelina, her expression one of surprise, pressed him further, asking what he meant by proper usage. He clarified that by proper usage, he meant the ability to successfully replicate the theoretical process in a real-world application. He commended Adelina for her cleverness in thinking so far ahead, acknowledging that the proper way to utilize things varied significantly depending on the available technology. He explained that technology always comes with responsibility, and people must always consider how to use it, as its application can bring both great fortune and great misfortune depending on the circumstances. He then turned to Adelina and May, urging them to always think about how they use technology, reminding them that it is acceptable to fail, both in success and in failure. He added that reflecting on past failures to guide oneself forward is crucial, as failures allow for proper self-reflection, rather than simply learning without ever experiencing setbacks. Adelina looked slightly embarrassed by his words, while May beamed with a joyful expression, both accepting his gentle guidance. Later, the group gathered at a new location, where Masaru observed the surroundings and noted that the area looked ready for their work. He recalled the chief's recommendation for this specific place to begin building the city, acknowledging that he would need to level the ground first. As he surveyed the now perfectly leveled expanse, Masaru reflected on the immense power of his slot machine skills, finding them almost frighteningly effective. He mused that it appeared as if some epic battle had taken place, completely flattening the landscape. He remembered that the chief had recommended this relatively flat area at a high elevation, which would indeed make for a good location, but the ground itself was made of solid bedrock. Considering the challenging situation, he realized that this was a task that could only be accomplished using his unique processing skills, and he could not ask the rabbit folk for assistance with such a specialized endeavor. As he pondered whether it could truly be done, he resolved that there was nothing to do but try. With a surge of determination, he activated his abilities, a bright light emanating from his hand. The result was a square area of 100 meters per side, completely leveled. He noted that from his past experience in Polterium, it would take him about 6 hours for a full recovery of his magic. He had initially planned to level and expand the area gradually, but the immediate need had forced his hand. He considered his current magical reserves, noting that he would need 15 more units of magic for any additional tasks. He calculated that even if he abstained from using magic for 2 full days, the construction project would still remain on schedule. A wave of panic then washed over him as he wondered how he would manage, realizing that the remaining work could be completed by him alone in a few days. As he surveyed the vast, leveled expanse, his thoughts turned to the next phase, the arduous task of clearing the necessary land beneath the northern cliffs. Suddenly, a spark of realization ignited within him, his eyes widening in astonishment as he exclaimed that he had found it. He chastised himself for forgetting such a crucial element, something he had desired and needed since his arrival in this world, an objective that had been his top priority. Perched on the precipice, he gazed down at the gelatinous form below, joyfully calling out to Slime-chan. A true journey to another world, he knew, was never complete without such a creature. The rabbit-eared man, F, expressed his gratitude to Masaru, acknowledging his continuous efforts in helping and improving the village. Masaru simply hummed in response. He continued, stating that Masaru was even assisting in building a city, and that he had complete trust in his actions. Masaru, however, internally questioned the man's unwavering confidence. Moments later, Masaru introduced a new slime creature to the gathered villagers, explaining that he would be raising it for a while and asking everyone to get along with it. The villagers, surprised, wondered aloud what the strange, gelatinous creature was. Masaru then clarified his intentions, explaining that he planned to use the slime for waste disposal and other purposes in the future. For now, however, he intended to conduct more research and learn about the creature, as it was currently docile and not attacking anyone. The rabbit-eared man, F, listened with a look of concern. He further elaborated, recalling his time in Politarium where he had extensively read about magical beasts. He explained that there were creatures that were not hostile to humans and could coexist, serving as resources just like wood and stone. With a confident smile, Masaru declared his immediate goal, to make a toilet, an inner thought confirming his excitement for the project. The rabbit-eared man, F, and the rabbit-eared woman, C, looked on, with F asking if Masaru wanted to try it for himself. The rabbit-eared man, F, appeared deep in thought, admitting that he had never considered magical beasts as a resource in that manner before. He then asked Masaru if his earlier statement about testing the slime meant using it for waste disposal. Masaru confirmed, adding that he also needed to confirm what the slime could digest as food and identify its weaknesses for future control. Masaru then proposed capturing and raising the monitor lizards found in the area to improve their food situation. The rabbit-eared man, F, understood and agreed to inform everyone in the village, asking Masaru, as the chief, what he thought about raising slimes as the first step. Masaru thanked him profusely. He meticulously documented his findings in a research diary, focusing on a magical beast known as a slime. This particular specimen measured 60 centimeters, was shaped like a manju, and possessed a translucent green hue, feeling squishy to the touch. Observing its movements, he noted that if the foothold it attempted to use was less than 2/3 the area of the ground it was climbing from, the slime would simply slide down. It struggled to ascend surfaces higher than its own height, revealing itself to be a somewhat clumsy, yet endearing, creature. As a test of its digestive capabilities, he offered the slime various forms of garbage, including leaves and raw wood. The slime slowly absorbed the refuse into its body, digesting it over several days. While it eventually processed everything, it did not seem to particularly favor leaves and wood. Despite his high expectations, an incident occurred a few days later. He reacted with shock to a new development, realizing that the slime might not be suitable for handling human waste after all. He rushed to find the slime significantly shrunken, exclaiming in alarm. He quickly deduced the cause. It was dry, desperately needing water. This incident revealed a critical weakness. Slimes are susceptible to dehydration. Further experiments confirmed they are also vulnerable to fire and seawater. With the discovery of the slime's unique traits and a method to manage their weaknesses, he formulated a new hypothesis. Recruiting volunteers to help raise slimes became significantly easier, with villagers like the rabbit-eared man and woman readily assisting. His hypothesis proposed that slimes could be one of the world's self-cleaning mechanisms. He realized that when placed in water, the slime would absorb only impurities, leaving behind clean water. This profound realization, brimming with knowledge, was a direct result of his diligent experiments. He reflected that it was a great relief the villagers no longer had any objections to the slimes, but a lingering thought remained unsaid. He found himself in a familiar dilemma. A young rabbit girl, No May, innocently asked if they could keep slimes as pets, a question that brought a pang of discomfort. He knew it was painful to constantly remind everyone that magical beasts, despite their growing popularity as pets, were still dangerous monsters. His internal struggle was evident as the chief, a rabbit man, looked at him with an exasperated expression, letting out a long sigh. He questioned Masaru, asking if he was truly serious about something. The blonde woman, Adelina, noticed the chief's heavy sigh and inquired about its cause. The chief, still amazed, explained that he simply couldn't believe Masaru was involving them in all this slime business when they already had so many other tasks. Adelina, however, quickly came to Masaru's defense, stating her certainty that he had a proper reason for his actions and that it would eventually become clear. Despite her reassurance, the chief then turned to Masaru, asking why he was leaving the village again to gather resources. He responded by explaining that for the future management of the city, he believed they did not possess nearly enough material. His goal was to preserve the surrounding area as much as possible, a foresight the chief admitted he had not considered at all, having left all such concerns to Masaru. With the chief's understanding, he expressed his gratitude for their willingness to help. He then made a specific request to the gathering team. He needed them to collect tree seeds and saplings. Adelina, curious, asked what he intended to do with them, to which he simply replied, plant them. As he and the chief began the task of planting the young trees, he elaborated on his plan. He explained that planting saplings was a way of preparing for the future, a concept known as tree planting in his original world. He emphasized that while it took months and years for trees to grow, they could be cut down in only a moment. He continued, explaining that by lending a hand to the mountains and forests, they could gather the wood they needed while still maintaining a plentiful environment. He humbly added that this knowledge came from his experience working in a home center, not from any specialized expertise in saplings or fertilizers. Adelina, observing him from a distance, remarked that he was, as usual, thinking 10 steps ahead. She then inquired about the sheer scale of his plan, asking exactly how many saplings he intended for them to plant. He responded with a detailed strategy. They would grow the saplings in the village until they reached waist height, then move them to the mountains. He encouraged them to try to cultivate many different varieties, ultimately leaving the specific judgment and experience of the task to everyone involved. He declared his intention to go alone this time, emphasizing that he would not be bringing anyone with him, clearing his throat to underscore the finality of his decision. Despite his firm declaration, the next morning found Adelina and May standing ready, calling out to him with cheerful insistence to begin their journey. He remained on the ground, seemingly taken aback by their presence. As they prepared, Adelina questioned his purpose, asserting that this was a perfect opportunity for her to broaden her understanding of the world. May, however, suggested that Adelina, as a noble lady, should remain behind, noting that only 3 days had passed since her arrival. Adelina, surprised by May's words, asked if she had forgotten their previous conversation while he observed their exchange. Undeterred by May's concerns, Adelina firmly stated that the two of them would proceed on their own, as they had no other immediate plans. She then embraced May, who responded with a joyful exclamation. He, witnessing their closeness, wondered if this was a form of coercion. Adelina then handed him a letter, instructing him to read it. Later, as the trio ventured into the forest for their first day of scouting, he inquired if their sole task was to gather wood. Adelina clarified that while they would gather wood, they also had other objectives. He then elaborated, explaining that he had discussed tree planting with the chief and intended for them to gather seeds and saplings of edible and medicinal plants during their outing. He reminded them to be cautious of wild plants and animals, emphasizing that cohabitation was their primary concern. His words prompted Adelina to reflect, remarking that he sometimes spoke of rather complicated matters. May listened with a slightly pensive expression. He continued, explaining that in the world he once inhabited, human civilization had developed excessively, leading to the extinction of numerous species. He believed that humanity wielding too much power was detrimental to the world, and thus, he wished for them to live in harmony with this new world, recognizing all living things as God's beloved children. After his profound statement, he sheepishly admitted that he might have been trying too hard to sound impressive, scratching his head in mild embarrassment. His self-deprecating humor brought smiles to their faces. Adelina looked at him with a warm, knowing smile, while May laughed joyfully beside her. He received a playful but firm whack from Adelina, who declared that if the man who met the gods directly said something, then it must be true. May stood by observing. With the discussion settled, Adelina enthusiastically suggested they begin gathering, expressing her hope that they would find many interesting things. He agreed, proposing they start their search around the immediate area. Sometime later, Adelina stood beside a substantial pile of freshly cut logs, letting out a satisfied sigh. She mused aloud, believing she had done a rather good job. As Adelina continued her work, May, having gathered a significant amount of plants herself, decided it was time to call out to him. She wondered how far he had gone, recalling his earlier mention of a safety check. Suddenly, May's sensitive rabbit ears twitched, picking up the distinct sound of swords clashing in the distance. A realization dawned on her. Masaru must be fighting. She quickly moved towards the sound, calling out his name, her concern evident. She arrived to find him in the midst of combat, deflecting what appeared to be several flying swords. Adelina, having followed May, exclaimed in surprise at the sight of the airborne blades and urged May to catch one. Adelina, with a look of utter shock, managed to catch a large, wet, and slimy object that Masaru had deflected. Moments later, he was struck by something unseen, while Adelina struggled with the squirming, slimy mass, yelling at him for making her catch such a thing. May, now standing with Adelina, questioned him about the dangerous-looking beast. He explained that he had tried to chase it away, but it had attacked him instead. Adelina, still covered in slime, expressed her amazement, while he apologized, admitting he thought she would simply dodge. She, however, warned him not to expect such an easy escape next time. The source of the commotion was revealed to be a truly massive, segmented worm. May identified it as such, and he elaborated, explaining that similar creatures existed in his old world. These worms, he clarified, normally lived underground, consuming insects and enriching the soil, allowing plants to grow abundantly. He pondered the giant worm's movements, noting the absence of entry or exit holes. Adelina explained that the creatures utilized earth magic to shift the ground as they moved, leaving no trace. Masaru, astonished, questioned if worms could truly wield magic. Adelina continued, revealing that the worm's material fetched a high price in Polterium. May added that she had heard it could even be used to craft bowls. Masaru, intrigued, asked for more details on its applications. She elaborated, stating that the worm's muscle was both elastic and durable, making it suitable for bowstrings and leather armor, among other things. Masaru realized it was an unexpectedly useful material and wondered if people actively hunted such creatures in this area. Adelina gave him a pointed look, reminding him that she had just mentioned its high value, subtly implying the difficulty in defeating such a creature. May, however, beamed with pride, exclaiming that it was just like her Onii-chan to overcome such challenges. Masaru considered the prospect, thinking it might be worthwhile to add the hunting of magical beasts for useful materials to their list of activities. Adelina then suggested finding someone to assist them. May, meanwhile, mentioned that they typically hunted monitor lizards and guinea fowl for food, but then her ears perked up, detecting a distinct rustling sound nearby. Suddenly, a massive, wolf-like beast lunged from the dense foliage, its eyes glowing with predatory intent. May cried out in terror, her face contorted in shock as the creature bore down upon them. Masaru observed May's extreme fear, noting it was reminiscent of their first encounter with the stray goblin, but quickly realized this situation was far more perilous. He drew his sword, preparing for the imminent confrontation. Despite her terror, May instinctively grabbed Masaru's clothing, attempting to hold him back. She knew her Onii-chan was strong, but the sheer size and ferocity of the beast overwhelmed her with worry. He watched as Rabbit Girl, her face contorted in fear and tears streaming down her cheeks, desperately warned him. She cried out that he would surely die, emphasizing that this was one time he absolutely should not fight. Still, he held her hand firmly, reassuring her that he would return immediately. He explained that he needed to at least confirm what they were truly dealing with, despite her continued pleas for him to stay away. He knelt before her, acknowledging her fear that merely being in the same area as the beast was dangerous. He offered a gentle smile and promised he would not fight, seeking to calm her distress. Suddenly, a monstrous roar erupted, and the massive wolf-like beast lunged from the dense foliage, its jaws wide and teeth bared. The attack was swift and brutal, catching Masaru completely off guard, his eyes widening in shock. Masaru found himself in a sudden, terrifying predicament as a massive, rampaging bear-like creature burst through the forest. Its sheer size and ferocity were overwhelming, causing him to panic. He slid down against a tree, gasping for breath, immensely relieved to have escaped the immediate danger. Still recovering, he reflected on the encounter. The creature was undeniably a bear, yet unlike any he had ever seen, standing 4 meters tall with 4 limbs, far beyond any magical beast he knew. His attention then shifted to another strange sight, a dead horse, abnormally large, lying further down the path. He wondered if the two creatures had been fighting over territory and decided to use his appraisal skill to learn more. Activating his skill, he identified the deceased animal as a mutated savanna horse, a species that evolves by accumulating an abnormal amount of magicules, developing horns tougher than copper and iron. He pondered the concept of magicules in this world, and the unsettling question of why the massive bear-like creature, which had killed and eaten this strange horse, had suddenly left. As he continued to ponder, the sky opened up, and rain began to fall, signaling a change in the weather. He realized the rain meant they would have to stop their gathering for the day. He needed to return to camp, meet up with May and Adelina, and report his unsettling discoveries to the chief. The rain continued to fall steadily, soaking the camp tents. Inside one of the tents, Masaru sat with Rabbit Man F, Blonde Woman G, Rabbit Girl A, and Blonde Girl B, explaining his encounter. He informed them that the creature he had faced was a demon bear. He continued his report, explaining that the giant horse he had encountered was also a mutated creature, likely due to magicules. He added that the villagers had been powerless against such terrifying beasts, which used to appear every few years when they lived by the shore, always leading to natural disasters. The Rabbit Man, F, expressed relief, stating they were fortunate this time. Masaru thanked him, acknowledging that listening to May had been a wise decision. Inside a tent, the Rabbit Man, F, further explained that the demon bear's hunger should now be somewhat satisfied. He added that the bear also tended to leave when it sensed rain approaching. Masaru, listening intently with the two young girls, questioned why this was the case. Masaru, surprised, asked if this meant the rainy season was beginning. The Rabbit Man, F, confirmed that this very rain signaled its arrival. Blonde Woman G, Adelina, expressed concern, wondering what would happen if the demon bear came to their village. The Rabbit Man, F, calmly reassured her, reminding her of his earlier statement about their good fortune. The Rabbit Woman, C, elaborated, explaining that around this time of year, they often experience 2-week-long rains. She described how the plains, forests, and fields would transform into a single giant lake, with water levels rising from ankle to knee depth. She continued, asserting that even the formidable demon bear could not move freely in such conditions. She concluded that if they could sufficiently prepare during this period, there should be no problem. Masaru listened, a sudden realization dawning upon him, his eyes widening. As Masaru began to stand, the Rabbit Woman, C, called out to him, asking where he was going. He turned, inquiring what she meant, and she emphasized that the areas where animals lived would also change, especially aquatic animals, as they would be spread all over the place. The Rabbit Woman, C, confronted him, urging him not to fight the bear by himself. He apologized to everyone, stating that while he knew the bear was important, he simply could not take it anymore. With a sudden dash, Masaru declared he needed just one day to eat something other than meat, lamenting that the village offered nothing else. He called it torture for his Japanese taste buds. The young girls, Rabbit Girl A and Blonde Girl B, commented on his speed, noting they were accustomed to his peculiar episodes. Masaru ran through the rain-soaked landscape, splashing through puddles. He stumbled, then looked down, realizing he had felt something under his foot. He exclaimed in surprise at his discovery. Masaru, having ventured into the flooded plains, suddenly found himself face-to-face with a massive crab. He reacted quickly, attempting to secure the creature, his thoughts already turning to his item box. He successfully captured the enormous forest green gazami, a giant crab known to turn emerald green when wet. Overjoyed, he realized the flooded area was a treasure trove of edible creatures and resolved to catch everything he could. His hunt continued with remarkable success. He soon added a jeweled scissor crab, a garland poison toad, green moss crayfish, a very long eel, and a stealth python to his growing pile, feeling immensely satisfied with his diverse haul. As he reveled in his bounty, a voice startled him. Victinius had appeared, questioning why he was out alone, muttering to himself. She seemed unfazed by the rain. While he was caught completely off guard, still recovering from the surprise, he pressed her on her presence. She casually explained that her god barrier kept her dry, a revelation that immediately sparked his desire for such an ability. She then clarified her true purpose, stating she was merely curious about his plans for the impressive collection of creatures he had gathered, dismissing any other reason for her appearance. He, in turn, wondered if a goddess like her had ever truly experienced a meal. He acknowledged her keen interest, admitting a slight enjoyment in teasing her. He then extended an invitation, suggesting they treat themselves to a meal together, hinting at the deliciousness of his fresh catches. Victinius, her curiosity piqued, began to follow him. Together, they swiftly constructed a temporary base, a simple but effective shelter against the elements, which Masaru proudly declared complete. He began preparing the crab, reassuring Victinius that they would cook it properly, not eat it raw. He instructed her to wait patiently while he worked, promising a great meal. She watched him intently, seemingly searching for something. With a determined smile, he set about cooking the large crab over a makeshift fire, while Victinius observed him from a short distance, her expression unreadable. He continued to tend to the cooking fire, the water boiling vigorously, as Victinius watched him with a thoughtful expression. She then reached out, her hand nearing a soft, fluffy object, her gaze still fixed on Masaru. Moments later, a fluffy cloth landed on his head, startling him with its suddenness and causing him to flinch. Victinius, now standing behind him, began to dry his hair with the cloth, instructing him to stop moving as he was making her task more difficult. He winced, complaining about the rough treatment and questioning if such actions were typical of her character. She turned her head away, a slight blush on her face, and admitted that her actions were purely selfish, then curtly told him to focus on the fire. He quietly accepted her command, and she quickly added that her assistance was also a way of acknowledging his hard work in helping the village and the seaside town. As the evening progressed, the two remained by the fire, Victinius diligently drying Masaru's hair, a quiet understanding settling between them. Finally, the boiled crab was ready, and Masaru proudly presented their meal. He struggled to open the tough shell, prompting Victinius to demonstrate the proper technique, explaining that one had to pull it apart in a specific way. With a radiant smile, she savored the first bite, exclaiming how utterly delicious it was. She savored the last bites of the crab, marveling at the delicate balance of rich umami and sweetness, declaring Masaru's cooking impressive. Meanwhile, Masaru quickly devoured his own portion, realizing he needed to eat faster before Victinius consumed it all. After finishing the meal, she thanked him, noting it was the first time she had eaten anything quite like it. Then, she inquired if she could take some leftovers back for her sister, Ain, to which Masaru readily agreed. He remembered Ain, the one who had written the message, and seemed to possess more common sense than anyone else he knew. Masaru then playfully chided Victinius, stating that her last comment about Ain was unnecessary. Victinius then pondered how he would manage to transport the food without it losing its taste once it cooled. He assured her it would be fine, as he could simply place it in his item box. She observed that he truly possessed the ability to create many different things, including useful tools and food. He reminded her that she was the one who had granted him his skills, but she countered, explaining that his skills were merely the most basic of basics, useless without the knowledge to apply them. He then revealed that he had worked at a home center in the countryside, implying that was where he acquired his extensive practical knowledge. The home center in the countryside was a massive building, open from early morning to late at night, functioning as a retail shop where one could find all sorts of flowers and plants. During the planting season, the shop would open earlier than usual to assist local farmers. He had diligently studied how to handle various flowers, trees, seeds, and saplings, keeping them in stock throughout the year. His responsibilities extended far beyond plants, encompassing everything from woodworking and electronics to pet food, stationery, bedding, and even diapers. He had learned to build and dismantle coops and sheds, lay bricks, and pave surfaces. He lamented the sheer volume of information he had to retain, not to mention the futility of knowing it if he couldn't explain it to others. He complained about the lazy manager who never did anything and the constant need to learn about new products without adequate staff support. Victinius acknowledged his struggles, then playfully asked if he had heard about the bronze statue made in her honor, adding that she couldn't be more proud. Masaru, visibly flustered, admitted he had heard about it, but quickly changed the subject, suggesting that the people were doing well because of her help. Masaru, his expression resolute, declared that they needed to address the threat of the demon bear. He reasoned that failing to do so would hardly be a welcoming gesture to the beast folk who had recently settled in the new city. The image of the monstrous bear filled his mind. As Masaru spoke, Victinius, her brow furrowed, vehemently rejected any suggestion of running away. She declared that she would never acknowledge such a concept, her stance firm against any hint of weakness. Masaru observed her, a slight smile playing on his lips, her distress evident. Victinius's eyes welled with tears as she passionately asserted that she could not stand the thought of him being weak. She reminded him of his journey, of all the incredible feats he had achieved since arriving in this new world. He continued to smile, acknowledging her words and admitting that he had indeed come out for a hunting spree. Then, with a teasing tone, he suggested that her concern made it sound as if he were running away from the bear. Flustered and blushing, she pointed a finger at him, emphatically stating that she would never forgive him for even entertaining such a notion. Still amused, he pressed her, asking what she would do if he truly did end up running, especially if a goddess like her had decreed it. He then pushed further, playfully calling her a useless goddess and questioning if she was merely a child, provoking an indignant reaction from her. The town buzzed with activity as its inhabitants diligently fortified their defenses. Workers hauled dirt and water to thicken the walls, while others brought anti-stake materials. Masaru arrived, observing the progress, and noted that the wall near the entrance was almost complete. He stood alongside a rabbit-eared man, surveying the newly reinforced palisade. The sturdy wooden stakes, now backed by stone and earth, looked formidable, prompting the rabbit-eared man to declare the defenses were looking good. As they continued their inspection, Masaru inquired about the progress of other areas. The rabbit-eared man explained they were also planning to add platforms to the lookout posts, which would allow archers to fire from above, ensuring they would no longer need to worry about small attacks. He then requested more stone materials, to which the rabbit-eared man confirmed that the traps outside the town were also progressing smoothly. Masaru acknowledged this, musing that he had plenty of stone to spare from clearing the land for the city he intended to develop. Masaru reflected on the situation. The lull brought by the rainy season had allowed their demon bear countermeasures to progress smoothly. He admitted to himself that while he had wanted some time to level up, he was content with strengthening the village's defensive capabilities. Later that night, Masaru sat eating, contemplating a new skill he had acquired, mapping, which seemed unrelated to cooking. A young rabbit-eared girl, sitting nearby, asked if he meant fire magic when he spoke of firepower. He wondered aloud if he could use rabbit folk magic, noting it felt different from typical magic. He considered her question, realizing that perhaps the fox people might have someone capable of such abilities. He decided he would ask Lancelot to send a fox person over first to investigate this possibility. Adelina, having overheard their discussion, interjected, stating that she did not believe there were any beast folk who could use magic. She clarified that while beast folk possessed amazing physical capabilities, they had little in the way of magical ability. Masaru paused, a sudden realization dawning on him. He turned to Adelina, asking how many magic users there had been in the city they came from. He then mused that he hadn't actually seen any magic at all since arriving in this new world, nor had he seen any of the rabbit folk use it. Adelina pondered the scarcity of magic, recalling that in her experience, only 2 individuals possessed the ability to produce water. Meanwhile, Masaru, hearing a faint sound, was lost in thought, reflecting on the useless goddess Victinia's and the stark contrast between her promises of a dazzling world of swords and magic and the reality he now faced. Suddenly, a distinct beep echoed, and a new message appeared on his device, startling Adelina and drawing the curious gazes of the rabbit folk. The message, from Goddess Ariefra, promised to reveal the state of magic in this world. He reacted with a start, exclaiming that this was a divine message, a direct communication from the goddess he had previously mentioned to them. The divine message then began to unfold, detailing the current state of science and magic in this world, explaining that it was slowly building up its foundational knowledge and principles. It continued, explaining that while magical beasts specialized in using magic, the sapient races, including humans, elves, droppies, beastfolk, and demons, had halted their research at the observational stage, failing to delve deeper into its understanding. Therefore, the goddess looked to Masaru to be the one to show them the path of magic and advance the civilization of this world. He then hesitantly admitted that he supposed he could use healing magic, a revelation that surprised his companions. Adelina and the rabbit folk exchanged glances, while he continued to ponder the message. He clarified that he did not know the principles of magic, but if the message was about teaching knowledge, perhaps it meant for him to help the people of this world study. He believed he could at least build facilities to help magic become more widespread. A new idea sparked within him, and he declared that, in other words, he would need to build a school. He then began to describe his vision, explaining that a school was a place to gain knowledge, where almost everyone spent 9 years learning all sorts of things, starting from 6 years old, and even more for those who wished to further their studies. The rabbit folk listened intently, asking if this was something from his world. He explained that while it was difficult to articulate the vast technological disparity between their worlds, he possessed something that could perfectly illustrate the difference. Adelina, intrigued, acknowledged that their world also had its own forms of technology, prompting him to consider how technology had spread in her world. With a flourish, he presented a sleek, rectangular device, exclaiming it was a smartphone. The young rabbit girl and the small blonde girl watched with wide-eyed astonishment. He carefully placed the device on the table, proudly declaring it a representation of his world's advanced technology. Adelina looked at it with a questioning gaze, while the small blonde girl, utterly unfamiliar with such an object, simply asked if the small item was a box. As he attempted to activate the device, a low battery icon appeared, much to his dismay. He had forgotten to charge it. Adelina, however, was surprised it could even attempt to turn on, prompting him to ponder if the time-stopping properties of his item box were responsible for preserving its charge, much like how it kept food from spoiling. Despite the charging issue, he continued to explain the smartphone's fundamental purpose, an incredible item that allowed one to communicate with people far away. Adelina, her curiosity piqued, eagerly pressed him to reveal more of its capabilities. He elaborated, detailing how the device could store and play tens of thousands of songs, and perform other functions such as taking pictures and videos, further astonishing his audience. He continued, listing even more advanced features, including the ability to play games and access the internet, which he described as a vast, comprehensive dictionary. The rabbit girl listened, her expression a mix of awe and bewilderment. Recognizing that his detailed explanations might have been overwhelming, he declared that he would simply demonstrate the smartphone's functions immediately. The children around the table, including the beastfolk boy and girl, cheered with excitement at the prospect. True to his word, he began a lively demonstration. Adelina and the rabbit girl delightedly took a selfie, capturing their smiling faces. He showed the device to the beastfolk girl and the small blonde girl, who then used its calculator function with fascination. The rabbit girl listened to music, notes floating around her, while the rabbit man and beastfolk boy also observed the marvels of the smartphone. Later, under the crescent moon, he sat alone, clutching his head in distress. He realized he had become too relaxed, allowing himself to be sidetracked by frivolous activities, and urged himself to regain focus. He sat contemplating his situation, realizing that while education itself was not the issue, he could not effectively teach others if they lacked fundamental prior knowledge. He knew he needed to focus on understanding magic. He continued to ponder his limitations, lamenting what he could possibly achieve when healing magic was the only ability he possessed. Suddenly, he remembered Victinia's, the goddess. Victinia's materialized before him, declaring his problem simple. She explained that since he was the only one capable of using magic, she had assumed he had deliberately tricked her. Masaru reacted with visible shock at her accusation. She reminded him that he had only utilized magic for reinforcement thus far, recalling his duel with Lancelot and the earlier confrontation with bandits. Masaru questioned her assertion, believing he had used magic in the mountains, but Victinius clarified that those instances were merely his innate skills at work. Victinius further elaborated that the skills bestowed in the realm of the gods manifested according to the receiver's mental image. In Masaru's specific case, his abilities were profoundly influenced by his past work at a home center and his passion for games, resulting in skills that resembled modern technology. Masaru then inquired if healing magic in this world operated differently. Victinius confirmed that to perform healing, one first required medical knowledge, and even after activation, the healing process still demanded time. He acknowledged her explanation, realizing that the skills he had acquired were indeed oddly convenient and uniquely suited to him. He then asked what steps he should take to properly use magic, similar to how he had in the duel. Victinius questioned if he recalled the sensation of magical energy coursing through his body during skill activation. He affirmed that he did, even admitting to having completely depleted his magic on one occasion. She instructed him to visualize using that magic as a fuel or energy source, picturing it flowing within him. She clarified that the fundamental principle of using magic involved understanding how that flow originated, how to strengthen it, and how to activate it. Masaru, with a determined expression, gave a thumbs up and readily agreed to try her method. Victinius, however, harbored a quiet concern, wondering if her direct intervention counted as forbidden interference. She stammered, her face flushed, insisting that everything was fine and denying any fear of being reprimanded by Hera. Observing her flustered state, Masaru wondered if she was genuinely concerned, but she quickly tried to play it off. Suddenly, she delivered a swift, admonishing punch, warning him not to get carried away. He winced, asking if he could at least help her with something. Still blushing, she looked away, explaining that her actions were due to her younger sister, Erisphera, the goddess of magic, and that this was the least she could do. Masaru, however, simply smiled, praising her for stepping up as an older sister and assuring her he had no complaints about magic. After witnessing that unexpected side of Victinius, Masaru began his daily research into magic. Meanwhile, the village finally completed its countermeasures against the anticipated bear attack, and a sense of normalcy returned, allowing everyone to enjoy their peaceful days once more. Despite all the preparations, Masaru found himself deeply disappointed, holding a book with a frustrated expression, because the bear had not even come, even though the season had ended. As the villagers gathered, one of them remarked that it was a good thing the bear hadn't come, but others quickly countered, insisting that if it returned next year, they would have to take it down. The rabbit woman reassured Masaru, explaining that the village was now safer, and the arrows he had prepared could still be used for hunting. He acknowledged her words, understanding the practicality of her statement. Masaru then began to explain his design, detailing how he had added backward barbs to the arrows, making them extremely difficult to remove once they pierced their target. He continued, explaining that when poison was added to the arrow tips, they became many times more effective, as the arrows could not be pulled out while the poison circulated through the target's body. He stood before the villagers, who praised the bows and arrows he had crafted, noting their exceptional quality. One of the rabbit-eared men remarked that the weapons were truly merciless, designed for fighting for their very lives. He then presented a new bow, explaining that it was one they had specifically requested, crafted from a treant. He assured them its power was on a different level from their usual bows and would be great to use. However, as the rabbit-eared man attempted to draw the bowstring, he found it incredibly stiff, barely able to move it. The rabbit-eared man struggled, his face contorted with effort, as he admitted that even their strongest could barely draw the bow, making it impossible to actually use. He speculated that their statuses might not be high enough. Another villager then urged Masaru to demonstrate how to shoot it, even if it was just once. He accepted the challenge, taking the bow. With a confident grip, he drew the string back, explaining that the technique was exactly the same as he had taught them, despite the bow's immense resistance. With a powerful release, the arrow shot forward, tearing through the air and striking the target with devastating force, shattering it. He reflected that it was no wonder the target didn't even leave a trace, considering the high magic power Masaru possessed. He mused that he had been pushing himself lately, and that his arrow thinking would eventually stop. As the villagers stared at the destruction, a new figure, a rabbit-eared scout, rushed towards them, his face etched with urgency. He called out, his voice strained. The scout gasped out a dire warning. Emergency. Near the North Cliff are demon bears. They're coming. Masaru's eyes widened in shock, the gravity of the situation instantly clear. A terrifying roar echoed from the distance, confirming the scout's report. The villagers panicked, questioning what they should do and if they should evacuate. Masaru, however, felt a strange coincidence, wondering if it was his fault. He noted that the roar sounded like it was coming from somewhere hurt, but he quickly dismissed the thought, realizing that this was what they had been preparing for at the Northern Cliff. He declared it would have been better to deal with this sooner. When the rabbit-eared man asked if he could handle it, Masaru grinned confidently, asserting that he absolutely could. He immediately took charge, instructing the chief to contact Adelina and begin the evacuation, while ordering everyone who could fight to stand by at the defense wall. He then declared he would take the lead, heading to where the bears were, and told the hunting team to come with him. As he prepared to depart, Masaru looked back at the rabbit-eared man, entrusting the village's safety to him before turning and declaring, "Let's go." He surged forward, his expression resolute, as the call to arms echoed through the village. "Demon bear hunt," Masaru declared, his voice ringing with determination. Beside him, a rabbit woman rallied the others, proclaiming, "For the peace and safety of this village, this is our first." The young man's command was clear. Let the hunt begin, as he led the charge, with the other villagers, including the children, following close behind, ready to face the encroaching threat.